Chapter 11:19. Shimin Linglan didn't know what to say. At this moment, she saw that Han Fei's eyes were still black and white. However, when Han Fei was getting closer and closer to her, the golden giant disappeared in the wind like golden powder. The glassy wings gradually faded, and the black and white colors in his eyes returned to normal. Plop! Han Fei fell to the ground. Luckily, Shimin Linglan reacted fast enough. She caught him and dragged him into the coiled turtle grand array. Wang Han, Wang Han. Idiot, Shimin Linglan looked around nervously. If the big red flower appeared again, this array wouldn't be able to stop it at all. Although Han Fei was covered in blood, Shimin Linglan was relieved after making sure that his breathing was stable and his heart was normal. After an entire day, the oppressive aura in the surroundings finally subsided. Han Fei didn't wake up, but Shimin Linglan could hear some noises around them. Shimin Linglan had never been so scared before. She wasn't afraid that she would die. She was afraid that something would break the array and kill them. Even such a powerful big red flower was killed by Han Fei. He shouldn't die here. Shimin Linglan was both scared and speechless. Han Fei suddenly took out a spiritual fruit from somewhere and stuffed it into his mouth. Shimin Linglan didn't know that Han Fei could turn spiritual fruits into spiritual fruits because she didn't sleep in the forest of the distant wilderness. Where did the spiritual fruit come from? Shimin Linglan snatched the spiritual fruit from Han Fei's hand. However, Han Fei's hand froze for a second. Then, a new spiritual fruit appeared out of nowhere and was stuffed into his mouth again. Shimin Linglan. On the second day, some creatures dared to break into this area. Most of the creatures went in the direction of the heavenly red hibiscus at first. They were probably going to eat its remains. However, this situation only lasted for a little over 4 hours before a living being arrived at the coiled turtle formation. At first, it was a python, then a black centipede, then a group of hedgehogs, and then more and more creatures came. At first, these creatures didn't fight with each other. They actually came here to cultivate and absorb the spirit chi attracted by the spirit gathering array. However, once there were more living beings, the spiritual chi would naturally be insufficient. Then, a fight broke out outside the spirit gathering formation. There were countless creatures in the distant, desolate forest. Once they started fighting, blood flowed like rivers. Not long after, everyone's eyes turned red from killing. There were also a lot of living beings who were fighting so hard that they didn't even know which direction they were going to take, and they simply crashed into the coiled turtle formation. Dong dong dong. Shimin Linglan's face was pale. She gritted her teeth and hugged Han Fei tightly, curling into a ball in the array. Wang Han, wake up. If we don't wake up, we'll die. Gotcha. Cracks appeared on the outermost layer of the coiled turtle formation. Shimin Linglan became more and more anxious. Shimin Linglan immediately had an idea. Wang Han, something happened to Xia Xiaochan. Xia Xiaochan was taken away by the bad guys. Xia Xiaochan. In Han Fei's dream, a lot of messy pictures flashed quickly. When he saw Tang Ji's young face, he shouted anxiously, Han Fei, wake up! He saw He Xiaoyu gulping down the swallowed spirit soup. I can't drink anymore. He heard Xia Xiaochan calling, Han Fei, help me put it on. I don't know how to. Han Fei, what do you want to eat today? Han Fei, let me tell you, I saw a very beautiful girl today. Brat, apart from people, there were also scenes of countless battles, warm scenes, and, cicada, Chun Huangyan's annoying face appeared in Han Fei's dream and looked at him condescendingly. Well, he can barely be called a heavenly talent. Is that all? Little princess, take one last look at him. I'm leaving. Han Fei felt that thousands of people were calling him in his head. It was so noisy that his head was about to explode. However, only one of them infuriated Han Fei. Hey Chun Huangyan, damn you! Shimin Linglan was shouting. Suddenly, she saw Han Fei roar. With a swoosh, he was about to jump up. Bam! Their heads collided with each other. Shimin Linglan clutched her head, feeling as though her head was about to split open. Han Fei's eyes were fierce, but as soon as he looked around, he returned from the dream to reality. She looked at Shimin Linglan, who was covering her head with her hands. However, for some reason, the image of another girl appeared in her mind. Xia Xiaochan? Shimin Linglan kicked Han Fei's foot angrily. All you know is Xia Xiaochan. When I call Xia Xiaochan, you get up. I'll change my name to Xia Xiaochan. You call me every day and I'll kill you. Women were creatures that couldn't be controlled when they got jealous. After being yelled at by Shimin Linglan, Han Fei instantly forgot about everything else. He couldn't help but rub his head. He looked at the creatures that were crashing into the coiled turtle array in shock, but he wasn't scared. Han Fei couldn't help but ask, "Where is this?" Fuzzy pictures popped up in Han Fei's head. It seemed that he was the one who did it. Wait, I seem to have become very strong just now. Huh? How did I become stronger? Han Fei stretched out his hand, and a drop of water appeared in his palm. Shimin Linglan, who was jealous, suddenly stopped talking when she saw this drop of water. She looked at Han Fei with a little panic in her eyes, wondering if he had changed into another person. However, when she saw Han Fei's slightly dull eyes, she was immediately relieved. He's still the same fool. He hasn't changed. His memory hasn't recovered. Han Fei looked at the infinity water in a daze, wondering, where did it come from? It seems that this drop of water can change. Han Fei waved his hand gently, and thousands of knives flew out and minced a pig-like creature that was charging outside the array into pieces in an instant. Hiss! Han Fei quickly retracted his hand, and the thousands of knives turned into a drop of water again. He was dumbfounded. Shimin Linglan didn't dare to speak or ask, for fear that this fool would ask more questions. However, Shimin Linglan dragged Han Fei and reminded him, "We should run away now. The smell of blood here is getting stronger and stronger, which will definitely attract powerful creatures." Han Fei scratched his head. "I seem to remember something." Shimin Linglan's body stiffened, and she said in an unnatural tone, "What did you remember?" Han Fei raised his head and said, "Fighting." "Who?" Shimin Linglan took a long breath and immediately roared, "You want to fight? Then hurry up and go. Are you waiting to be eaten?" Han Fei shrank his neck. "Isn't it a good thing that I remember how to fight? Why are you yelling at me?" However, Han Fei quickly got up and clenched his fist, and a golden fist mark blasted open a path. As Han Fei turned his hand, the law of gravity descended. In an instant, a large number of creatures fell to the ground. Han Fei chopped a pig to death with a karate chop, carried the pig on his shoulder, and ran away with Shimin Linglan. Shimin Linglan was speechless. "Why are you carrying a pig?" "To eat it," Han Fei said subconsciously. However, he thought for a moment. "Why do I want to eat pigs?" Immediately, Han Fei's eyes flashed. Braised pork. Huh! Shimin Linglan didn't understand much of it. She shouted, "Don't be silly. Give me the pig. I'll put it away." Behind the two of them, many creatures chased after them. Han Fei waved his hand, and the million knife art swept out, cutting a path. After running for dozens of kilometers, the two of them found that there were more creatures in the remote barren jungle. This was only the middle of the jungle. They hadn't reached the depths yet. A group of big spiders emerged from nowhere, and the front was covered with spider webs. Han Fei never knew the way. In the remote barren jungle, it was Shimin Linglan who led the way. However, Shimin Linglan actually didn't have enough exploration experience. Seeing that such a large area was surrounded by spiders, she didn't dare to go any further. Immediately, Shimin Linglan pointed to the depths of the jungle and said, "Go in that direction." On the way, after running for hundreds of kilometers, when a pack of wolves appeared, Shimin Linglan knew that they might have gone the wrong way. However, at this moment, the wolf pack was already rushing towards them. Not only the wolf pack, but also a large number of insects, which came out of nowhere and crawled everywhere. Shimin Linglan gritted her teeth and looked at Han Fei. Idiot, I'm afraid I can't get out of here. You go by yourself. As soon as Shimin Linglan finished speaking, Han Fei spread his wings and flew into the sky with her in his arms. Shimin Linglan had no flying experience. She saw Han Fei rushing around in the jungle. There were lightning ferrets, centipedes, and pythons on the trees. Shimin Linglan tried to calm herself down. Fly to the sky. Fly to the top of the forest. Han Fei flew away obediently. Shimin Linglan was so scared that she didn't even know where she was. Anyway, she only knew that with a swoosh, she appeared 100 meters away. With a swoosh, she lost her sense of direction. When the two of them flew into the sky, they saw a large group of birds hovering in the sky. Chirp! Shimin Linglan was dumbfounded. What should she do? For some reason, a large number of creatures appeared in the jungle. There were countless big birds hovering in the sky. There was no way out. Were they going to die this time? However, Shimin Linglan thought for a moment and realized that it wasn't right. She had never seen such a situation in the jungle in the past 5 years. Why was something wrong today? In panic, a flock of birds charged at them. The wind sky wings popped up in Han Fei's head. Then, he remembered a trick that they often used, which was to ride a bird. He extended the void lines and caught a bird. Han Fei felt that a lot of messy pictures were popping up in his head. Suddenly, a special group of people appeared in the countless images. They were all tall and big. Giants. At that moment, Han Fei couldn't help but look at the depths of the jungle. There was a desire in his heart to understand something. As for Shimin Linglan, she was dumbfounded. She asked 3 questions. Who am I? Where am I? What am I doing? Before she got used to the feeling of flying in the sky, she was already sitting on the back of a big bird, which roared and flew to the depths of the jungle. After Han Fei flew for a long time on the bird, Shimin Linglan finally figured out the direction of their flight based on the position of the sun. Shimin Linglan said, "Idiot, we're going the wrong way." "We're going back," however. When Shimin Linglan looked back, she saw countless birds chasing after the two of them like fighter jets. Shimin Linglan didn't feel good at all. She leaned into Han Fei's arms and said, "Okay, we'll fly wherever you want." Shimin Linglan felt that Han Fei could always change her perception. She didn't know that he was so capable before. But now Han Fei seemed to be able to control other creatures. She was already used to it. She wouldn't be surprised by anything that happened to Han Fei. Shimin Linglan felt that the past few years had been too exciting. Especially today, she was so excited that she almost wanted to give up on herself. There was no other reason. In the past, Shimin Linglan had always been suppressing herself. She kept telling herself, "Actually, I'm quite talented. It's this idiot's talent that's too monstrous." However, when Han Fei's strength left her far behind, she knew how strong that sense of loss was. She was just a slightly talented girl. Why did she have to compare herself with a peerless genius? However, as they flew, even Han Fei felt that something was wrong. In the depths of the jungle, there were strange beasts roaring. After more than 3,000 kilometers, Han Fei and Shimin Linglan saw a giant bear dozens of meters tall roaring and pounding the ground with its hands. For a moment, the grass and trees were flying and the earth was shaking. Shimin Linglan exclaimed, "It's a bear, a ferocious beast from the far wilderness. It's extremely powerful." Hearing Shimin Linglan's exclamation, Han Fei didn't know why, but a simple bear that was as tall as a human appeared in his mind. It didn't seem to match the size. While running, the bear looked up at the sky and roared. The sound waves rolled and shook the void. Han Fei quickly controlled the big bird under him to pull it up. However, at this time, several black spots appeared in the sky. They were as fast as arrows and swooped down in the blink of an eye. Shimin Linglan shouted again, "Not good, it's the snail-eating sky eagle. Their claws and sharp beaks are extremely powerful. They can even kill large conches." The void lines stretched out. When the snail-eating sky eagle appeared a kilometer away, Han Fei held Shimin Linglong in one hand and disappeared on the back of the bird. Swish! Swish! Shimin Linglong found that her position was changing rapidly. She was dizzy and couldn't tell north from south. Ding ding ding, sounds reverberated in the air. After a while, Shimin Linglong found that she was only 7 or 8 meters away from the snail-eating sky eagle. However, the speed of Han Fei's every flash was too fast. Before she realized it, either she was far away or the snail-eating sky eagle was far away. When she realized it, she was riding on the back of the bird again. However, this time, Shimin Linglong found that the mount under her had become a snail-eating sky eagle. Gulp! Shimin Linglong swallowed, tilted her head and looked at the dull Han Fei behind her, and suddenly saw that Han Fei's shoulder was bleeding. Shimin Linglong hurriedly said, "Are you hurt? Hurry up and treat me." A white light suddenly fell, and Han Fei's wound was healing rapidly. Han Fei murmured, "It seems that something happened." Shimin Linglong rolled her eyes. "Did you only find out now? Creatures like the heavenly red hibiscus shouldn't have appeared in the middle of the remote wilderness jungle. And why didn't the giant bears stay in the depths of the jungle? Nothing special had happened in the past 5 years, but it happened today. This more fully indicated that something had happened in the depths of the remote wilderness jungle or even in the depths of the 100,000 mountains. They flew all the way for more than 5,000 kilometers. At this time, Shimin Linglong found that there were no more creatures running to the periphery of the remote wilderness jungle. Moreover, this place was extraordinarily quiet. Even the birds in the sky had become much fewer. The flocks of birds had disappeared. Shimin Linglong liked it. "Wang Han, are we going to the 100,000 mountains? It's said that the 100,000 mountains is extremely dangerous. The legendary mountain giants and giants live there." Han Fei scratched his head. "I want to go there." Han Fei didn't know why, but there seemed to be a voice in his heart telling him not to let go of this opportunity. If he missed this opportunity, he might never have another chance. That was Han Fei's long-cherished wish. He wanted to know the secrets of this world and the secrets of the shocking war in the Age of Doom. In the Age of Doom, there was no such thing as the 100,000 mountains. There were many seamounts in the sea, but these seamounts were usually occupied by a large number of marine creatures. When Han Fei controlled the snail-eating sky eagle to fly into the 100,000 mountains, everyone was a little shocked, including Shimin Linglong. As they flew across the sky, they could see the mountain ranges hidden in the clouds. There were peerless cliffs even higher than the sky where they were. After flying for only a moment, the view from the sky disappeared. Han Fei rushed into the mountains. There were mountains in front and behind them, some even reaching the sky. Han Fei spread out his senses, only to discover that all kinds of strange creatures seemed to be gathering, but they weren't fighting each other. Howl! A giant wolf stood on the top of a mountain, howling at the sky. There was far more than one such giant wolf. Han Fei suddenly said, "They are going to fight." Shimin Linglong didn't understand. She had long been shocked by the wonderful fairyland in front of her. After all, the creatures in the mountains couldn't fly to the sky, so she was not so afraid. Shimin Linglong even felt that as long as Han Fei was there was nothing to be afraid of. Han Fei would always have a way to survive in these places. However, if Han Fei said there was going to be a war, who would fight whom? Suddenly, a voice sounded in Han Fei's mind, "Human, why are you here?" Han Fei scanned with his perception, and it turned out to be a goat standing on a high cliff, staring at him. Han Fei responded, "I want to come." The goat said, "Humans have their own battlefront, and the 100,000 mountains have their own battlefield. After so many years, humans and the 100,000 mountains have never been on good terms. You'd better retreat." Of course, Han Fei refused to retreat, so he said, "Go to the giants." Shimin Linglong was surprised. "Idiot, who are you talking to?" Han Fei pointed to the distant cliff. "Follow the goat." Shimin Linglan's eyes widened. However, thinking that the strong could perceive very far away, she couldn't help but feel a little helpless. Of course, Shimin Linglan knew that Han Fei was not good at talking, so she immediately shouted to the air, "Senior Goat, we mean no harm. It's just that the human race can't tolerate us, so we came to the 100,000 mountains to seek survival." The next moment, a voice sounded in Shimin Linglan's mind, "Fly east. The war giants may accept you, but don't go to the battlefield of the beasts in the west." "Yes, Senior." Shimin Linglan was curious. "Is there also a battlefield here? Has the sea race already started a war with the 100,000 mountains?" Shimin Linglan quickly said to Han Fei, "Idiot, go east. Let's go east." Shimin Linglan was not an idiot. During peaceful times, the beast race had always been hostile to the humans. She had never heard of the war giants, but she had read about the mountain giants and the giant race in books. "We've been flying for a whole day. God knows how many mountains and rivers Han Fei and the others have passed. In short, the deeper we go into the 100,000 mountains, the more I feel something is wrong." A serpent soared into the air and stared at the two of them. The serpent asked, "Human, why are you here?" Shimin Linglan replied quickly, "Senior, the two of us have something important to do. We're going to the war giant." Perhaps the serpent regarded the two of them as messengers, so it didn't stop them. Instead, it roared for them, which calmed many restless creatures. After all, the serpent also saw that the strength of the two of them was ordinary, and it didn't want to be disturbed frequently. Thus, he simply roared at the top of his lungs. The two of them also encountered a giant eagle that covered the sky. The wild eagle flew over and asked, "Human, will you hurt this snail-eating heavenly eagle when you control it?" Shimin Linglan swallowed and looked at Han Fei. Han Fei seemed to know how powerful the giant eagle was, so he shook his head. "No." Shimin Linglan quickly breathed a sigh of relief. "Senior, when we reach the war giants, we will let this snail-eating heavenly eagle go." The giant eagle flapped its wings and flew into the sky, warning, "Human, remember what you said. Otherwise, you will become the enemy of the sky race." Things like this happened almost every now and then. Shimin Linglan was numb. These were all creatures that she had never seen before, and some of them had never even appeared in the books. Maybe they saw that the two of them were too weak, or maybe they saw that they kept flying east and really had something important to do with the war giants, so they let them go. Otherwise, Shimin Linglan felt that the two of them would have died 100 times. Walala! In the early morning of the next day, Shimin Linglan fell asleep in Han Fei's arms. Suddenly, she was woken up by a loud noise. When Shimin Linglan opened her eyes, she saw hundreds of thousands of ferocious birds flying in the sky with the two of them. "Hiss!" Shimin Linglan sucked in a breath of cold air and exclaimed, "What are they doing?" Above the sky was covered by black clouds, and countless birds were flying with them. Of course, they were flying at different heights. Soon, a golden eagle flew over. Shimin Linglan quickly said, "Senior, we are just going to the war giants." The golden eagle's eyes were cold. "When we get there, release the snail-eating sky eagle." Shimin Linglan nodded quickly. "Yes, Senior." In Han Fei's mind, the figure of a sky-surveying golden eagle appeared. This one seemed to be even bigger than the one he had seen. The golden condor broke through the sky and left. In the end, it said, "The sea race is attacking the 100,000 mountains. You two humans are too weak. When you arrive at the war giants, don't participate in the battle. It's better to convey this matter to the human masters." Han Fei and the others arrived at the war giants at noon on this day. It was a huge grassland with a huge city that was comparable to a mountain. In the vast mountains in front of the giant city, huge tents were set up everywhere. In Han Fei's perception, there were many giants with braids and wearing animal skins or fish skins who were refining weapons. Clang! 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 There weren't many giants that appeared on the grassland. Most of them were refining weapons. Or, they were relatively short giants, possibly the children of giants. Of course, even if they were children, they were much taller and stronger than Han Fei and the others. When the flock of birds flew across the sky, the giants could be seen roaring. Some people held huge axes and roared wildly. Some giant children chased the birds all over the sky, running wildly in the mountain grassland. Shimin Linglan looked at Han Fei. "Idiot, we have arrived at the war giants." In the sky, Shimin Linglan's worldview had already been subverted by Han Fei. Because she had long known where they were going, she had imagined what the giants looked like countless times in her mind. So, when she really saw them, she was only curious, not surprised. Han Fei didn't know why he came here. However, when he saw those giants, he wanted to land. So the snail-eating sky eagle swooped down. Under the gaze of a group of giants, Han Fei and Shimin Linglan landed. In the sky surveying golden eagle was hovering, and Han Fei withdrew the void lines. The snail-eating sky eagle fluttered its wings in panic and soared into the sky, for fear that if it ran too slowly, it would be controlled by Han Fei again. Gulp! Shimin Linglan tugged at Han Fei's clothes. She had never seen such a scene before. She didn't know how to face it. Dong dong dong. Woolyalu, a group of giant children chased each other, all the way to Han Fei and Shimin Linglan. Walla Waka! Of course, Han Fei and Shimin Linglan couldn't understand the giant language, so they stood on the ground stupidly. Those giant children looked at the two of them curiously. One moment they were dancing, and the next moment they began to gesture, seeming to measure their height. Han Fei looked up at these giant children and felt very uncomfortable. He and Shimin Linglan were both more than 1 meter tall, but a group of children came. The shortest one was probably more than 6 meters tall and looked like a baby. The tallest child was already more than 10 meters tall. Even if they squatted down, they still had to look up. Han Fei could even see the dust inside through the thick pores on the faces of these giant children. The giants had dirty braids on their heads, thick lips, flat noses, animal bones or fish teeth hanging on their necks and hands, bare feet, and strong muscles. Han Fei and Shimin Linglan had been surrounded by a group of giant children. A giant child seemed to want to poke Han Fei with his finger, but he seemed to feel that his finger was too thick and was afraid of poking Han Fei down, so he froze in the air for a moment. Shimin Linglan breathed quickly and grabbed Han Fei's arm tightly. She really couldn't communicate with him. Han Fei tilted his head and stretched out one hand. A big hand made of spiritual energy appeared in the air and touched the child's finger. Woolyalu! He saw a group of children suddenly jumping and jumping, causing the earth to shake and the mountains to shake. Roar! Roar! There was a roar, and an adult giant seemed to be scolding, holding a huge mace. He scolded a few times and drove the group of children away with the mace. The adult giant said something, and Han Fei scratched his head and mumbled, "I don't understand." Shimin Linglan was speechless. Then why did you come? After all, he was an adult giant. He seemed to understand and immediately roared at the vast mountains. Roar! Woolyalu waves of perception swept across Han Fei and Shimin Linglan, but the two of them didn't care. Mainly because they couldn't care. This was their territory. Besides, none of these giants were weak. Han Fei could clearly feel that even the giant child who stretched out his finger just now actually had the strength of a junior hanging fisher. In terms of strength, he might even be more than a junior hanging fisher. The gist of it was that with Shimin Linglan's current strength, she might not even be able to defeat a giant child here. Dumb. A large group of adult giants surrounded them. The average height of giants could reach 15 meters. Didn't they look like hills? Besides, in a group, there would always be some tall ones. The tallest one here was probably 20 meters tall. He couldn't even hit his knees when he jumped up. In the crowd, a giant wearing furry animal skin walked through the crowd, scolding the giants around him as he walked. Kakayawo then, many giants dispersed and went back to continue refining. There were only about 10 giants left in the area. That person was obviously the giant who was the leader. Standing 20 meters away from Han Fei and Shimin Linglan, he said in the human language that was not very familiar with, "Human beings, why are you here?" Seeing that there were giants who could speak the human language, Shimin Linglan looked at Han Fei excitedly. She didn't know why they were here. However, if Han Fei wanted to come, he would come. Han Fei looked at the giant and felt the power exuded by the man. It seemed that he was no match for him now. Why? Han Fei frowned and frowned harder and harder. Suddenly, he covered his head, and some chaotic pictures appeared in his mind. It was a mural of giants. He seemed to see the fall of the giants. Shimin Linglan's face changed drastically. She knew that Han Fei had a headache again. He must have remembered something in his mind. However, the giant opposite looked dumbfounded. "I didn't move," Shimin Linglan said. "Wang Han, don't think about it. If you can't remember, don't worry." Shimin Linglan quickly said to the giant leader, "Senior, we come from Yu City, and came through the wilderness. My name is Shimin Linglan, and his name is Wang Han. Wang Han seems to have something to do with the giants, but he can't remember anything. Warua. Kaka. For a moment, 7 or 8 giants started asking questions at the same time. The giant leader raised his hand and everyone quieted down. The leader said, "Too weak. He is better. When the king returns, he will know what to do. Let me teach you the Jotun first." Han Fei and Shimin Linglan were escorted to a huge tent. The giant leader said a few words to the people in the tent. Then, a female giant walked out of the tent with a pillar-like cane in her hand. The female giant was obviously a bit old. She looked at Han Fei and Shimin Linglan and then said to them, "Relax. I will teach you the Jotun." The female giant's finger flashed and pointed at Han Fei. Shimin Linglan was still a bit nervous. However, Han Fei knew that the other party didn't mean any harm, so he stood still. When the thick finger gently touched Han Fei's forehead, a large cluster of weird and obscure words entered Han Fei's head. It was like a soul imprint. Han Fei closed his eyes and let the words flow in his mind. After a while, when Han Fei opened his eyes again, he saw a group of giants looking at them. Shimin Linglan woke up not long after Han Fei. At this moment, the two of them heard someone say, "Human, do you understand now?" Shimin Linglan was stunned. Then, she said in shock, "Wang Han, I understand now. So magical." Shimin Linglan thought for a while, and said to the female giant in immature Jotun, "Thank you, senior. Ah, your voice is so small. It's not as loud as my daughter's voice. Humans are small to begin with." The group of giants was teasing each other when the female giant said, "Girl, you said that there's something wrong with his memory?" Shimin Linglan nodded. She couldn't help it. If she didn't say that, the two of them wouldn't even know why they were here. If they really said that, the other party might just kill them. The female giant nodded slightly. "Look at his dull expression. He's either a congenital idiot or his soul is injured. However, this boy is not weak. We can try to see if we can get any information from the battle. Shantu, why don't you fight with this little boy?" The giant called Shantu was dumbfounded. He said in shock, "Priestess, do I have to fight with him? What if I die?" The female giant snorted. "It's a problem whether you can defeat him or not. It's best if you can force this boy's real strength. As a priestess, she would always be wiser." Shimin Linglan definitely couldn't pass through the far wilderness jungle and the 100,000 mountains to come here. Since he wasn't, there must be something extraordinary about him. Shimin Linglan looked at Han Fei. "Idiot, can you? Why don't we wait for the giant king to come back?" Han Fei scratched his head. "Fight," Shantu immediately said in a humming voice. "Human, you are so small. You won't be killed by me? Why don't you hit me first and show me your strength?" Yes, Shantu is right. Yes, we can't hit him directly. We finally see two humans. We can't kill them. Shantu, control yourself. Don't make things difficult for this human boy. Han Fei scratched his head. Okay. Seeing that the priestess and the leader didn't object, many people who had been listening to them immediately ran over. Many giant children also ran over. The giant leader shouted, "Get out of the way! Give us a piece of land! Shantu, don't hit him too hard." First update. Asking for votes. End of this chapter. Chapter 11:20. Shimin Linglan felt that she must be crazy. Why did she come to this damn place with Han Fei? Those mountain-like giants didn't look easy to deal with. How could she fight with them? However, she also knew that Han Fei was very strong, especially when he fought with the big red flower that day. At that moment, Shimin Linglan felt that Han Fei was the real king. At this moment, a group of giants surrounded a field as large as a football field. A giant said to Shimin Linglan, "Girl, come to my hand." Then, Shimin Linglan sat on the shoulder of a giant, occupying the best viewing position. Han Fei looked at Shantu in surprise. Shantu scratched his head and said, "Come here. Hit me first so that I can judge your strength." Han Fei thought for a moment and nodded. With a flash of golden light, a golden fist mark blasted out. The invincible fist mark was not weak in the first place, and it followed the path of invincibility. The fist mark turned into about 2 meters in the air. Seeing this scene, Shantu's eyes lit up and he immediately grinned. Shantu didn't even block it. Although he felt that Han Fei's fist was not weak, it shouldn't be very strong. Boom! Bam! Shantu's huge body, which was 18 meters tall, directly sat on the ground, looking dumbfounded. "Ow, ow, ow! Shantu, you're so embarrassing! Ha ha! You're so strong! Shantu, your opponent is not weak. You can relax a little." Han Fei was slightly surprised. A golden fist imprint was only able to force Shantu to sit on the ground? His opponent's physique seemed to be a bit strong. Shantu laughed. "Good hit, boy, I'm coming." Dum, dum, dum. Suddenly Shantu got up, ran 2 steps, and leaped up. His huge fist flew across the sky, smashing towards Zhang Xian. Compared to giants, this speed should be quite fast. However, in Han Fei's eyes, it seemed to be full of loopholes. Under Han Fei's feet, a weird footwork appeared. His figure flickered, avoiding Shantu's fist, and he moved horizontally to Shantu's chest. Boom, boom, boom. Shantu flew dozens of meters away and rolled on the ground. "Oh, Shantu, you underestimated your opponent. Shantu, you are too weak. Shantu, you have been slacking off." Shimin Linglan shouted, "Wang Han, good job." Even the giant leader said, "Shantu, don't use brute force. Use 50% of your strength." Hearing this, Shantu's face turned red. He didn't expect Han Fei to be so powerful. When the giants heard that they would have to use 50% of their strength, they immediately rushed out, leaving an area with a radius of 1,000 meters. Shimin Linglan secretly stuck out her tongue. That was already very impressive. Now, he only had to use 50% of his strength? Shantu shouted, "Humans, get ready!" Buzz. As Shantu's body shook, Han Fei keenly sensed that the energy around him was being absorbed crazily. With a buzz, the will of the god of war appeared. All of a sudden, a 20-meter-tall golden giant showed up. Tu Shan was stunned and even forgot what he was going to do next. Hiss! Humans can also become giants? Wow, it's even higher than Shantu. It's golden and dazzling. It looks very powerful. The giant leader shouted, "Shantu, don't underestimate the enemy." There was a trace of fascination in Shimin Linglan's eyes. That's it. That's what happened that day. Shantu's face became serious and he shouted, "King of War's 8 flash." Swish, swish, swish. 7 or 8 rays of light flashed in the air. At the same time, in an instant, a fist mark bombarded in front of Han Fei. Han Fei raised his hand and blocked it with his palm. In an instant, he felt an immense power surging through him. He was blasted back more than 200 meters by the punch. Shimin Linglan's face changed greatly. Idiot, dodge. When the second fist mark appeared, a golden fist mark appeared in Han Fei's hand, and the array was instantly condensed. Boom. Han Fei retreated nearly 20 meters, and then punches appeared one after another. Han Fei blocked them all with the same method. In the blink of an eye, Han Fei was blasted back more than 100 meters again. Someone shouted, "Good job, Tu Shan." Someone laughed. Humans are still a bit weak. However, the giant priestess frowned slightly. She seemed to feel that something was wrong. This human seems to be more powerful than this. The giant priestess shouted, "Shan Tu, use 80% of your strength." Shimin Linglan shouted, "Senior, 50% of my strength is enough." Shan Tu also scratched his head. "Priestess, will I use too much strength?" The giant priestess looked at Shimin Linglan. "He hasn't activated his strength yet. Let's force him." Hearing this, Shan Tu thought to himself, "This human is still hiding his strength?" Immediately, the King of War's 8 flash appeared again. Han Fei changed his footwork and punched out consecutively. Suddenly, a large amount of golden light burst out. Boom, boom, boom. Explosions kept sounding and the ground shook. Although Han Fei was no match for Shan Tu in terms of strength, his footwork was excellent, so Shan Tu's attack didn't hit him. The priestess shouted in a low voice, "Boy, don't dodge. When you have to face a force you can't block, think about what to do. Shan Tu, use your full strength. Don't hold back." Hearing this, Shan Tu roared, "War Fist Light." Shimin Linglan clasped her hands and looked worried. Han Fei's eyes suddenly narrowed. "What if I don't dodge? I seem to have a secret method." The War Fist Light struck at him like a beam of light in an instant. The giant priestess was ready to save Han Fei. However, Han Fei suddenly opened his eyes and his aura suddenly soared. The golden giant transformed by Han Fei and the will of the god of war suddenly raised their hands and stretched out their hands facing the terrifying fist light. Boom! The giants all put up a light shield. Although they couldn't attack Shan Tu, they couldn't let their homes be destroyed. On the battlefield, Han Fei still maintained the posture of raising his hands and stretching out his palms. His body didn't shake at all, nor did he step back. At that moment, Han Fei suddenly activated Devil Change, and his strength soared. In an instant, his strength was raised to the level of an intermediate law enforcer. But on both sides of Han Fei, 2 fist auras appeared, blasting out huge ravines. Wow! So strong. He can even block it? This human has the power of law enforcer? Oh, Shan Tu, use your secret method. Otherwise, you can't beat him. Shan Tu, the boy is a human powerhouse. Shimin Linglan was dumbfounded. Law enforcer? He is already a law enforcer? Shimin Linglan didn't even dare to think about becoming a law enforcer. That was a law enforcer. Not everyone could easily become a law enforcer when they were above the hidden fisher level and comprehended the power of laws. How old was Han Fei? He was only 13 this year. How could he become a law enforcer? Shan Tu suddenly became very excited. "Ha ha ha, boy, since you are a law enforcer, then I will do my best." Shan Tu's muscles bulged even more, energy swirled around him, and a trace of illusory red light appeared on his body. God of War art. Swish. Shan Tu's speed was much faster than before. In an instant, he flashed over, and his fist aura was like a roaring dragon, piercing the void and breaking the sound barrier. It would not be an exaggeration to say that the punch was a small nuclear bomb. The giant leader shouted, "Shield array!" The onlookers all pushed out light shields. Han Fei's fist auras shot out again, followed by an array. Rumble! A pillar of light rose into the sky. When the scene calmed down, Han Fei and Shan Tu retreated more than 100 meters away at the same time. In Han Fei's mind, he calculated a number. Tu Shan was only a peak-level hidden fisher, but his strength exceeded 3 waves. After using the secret method, Tushan's strength exceeded 10 waves. Han Fei didn't know how he calculated it. He was just a little shocked. An ordinary giant could reach 10 waves of strength when he was a peak-level hidden fisher? What did this mean? If this number was among human beings, he would be a real top heavenly talent. Shimin Linglan kept swallowing her saliva. The other giants around them were also swallowing their saliva. But many children were shouting, "Wow! Human beings are so powerful." Brother Shan too couldn't even win. A child shouted, "Brother Shan too, come on." A giant shouted, "Shan too, fight!" Oh! Shan too roared. He was such a big man, but he couldn't even beat a little man? It was so humiliating. At that moment, his skin was flushing. The giant leader shouted in a low voice, "Mountain defense array!" Oh! The entire battlefield was shrouded. Shan Tu seemed to have exerted 120% of his strength. Han Fei was still stiff, but he didn't take a step back. Boom, boom, boom. Explosions continued on the battlefield, and smoke and dust filled the air. Shimin Linglan had already disappeared. She could see Shan Tu's huge figure, but she couldn't see Han Fei, because Han Fei was too fast. Dum! Dum! Ho! A loud shout rang in the battlefield, and the priestess said, "Remove the array. Shan Tu is about to break through." The giant leader said, "Human, leave the battlefield." Like a phantom, Han Fei flickered in the air, and appeared next to Shimin Linglan, standing on the shoulder of a giant. The giant that Han Fei stood on tilted his head and laughed. "Human, good job. You actually broke through Shan Tu's array. From now on, you are Shan Tu's best friend." Han Fei scratched his head and looked at Shimin Linglan, who was dumbfounded. "I feel that my body is too weak." Shimin Linglan gritted her teeth in anger. "Your body is still too weak? Have you ever considered my feelings? I was the one who taught you when you were young. Okay, now it's all you teaching me. Now you are a law enforcer, and you still say that your body is too weak? Isn't it a blow to my pride?" The breakthrough of giants was actually no different from the breakthrough of humans. After all, in essence, the giants were also a branch of the human race. It was just that the giants were a little bigger and stronger, so their demand for energy might be a little higher. Because it was a miracle of breaking through the law enforcers, they didn't leave but watched it together. After all, while watching, onlookers could actually feel a trace of the law. Shimin Linglan's strength was too low, so she couldn't feel it. She looked at Han Fei. "Idiot, when did you become a law enforcer? What law are you practicing?" Han Fei scratched his head. "I don't think I'm a law enforcer." "Huh! You're so strong without a law enforcer?" A giant said, "Girl, he didn't become a law enforcer. He used a secret method, a very powerful secret method." Secret method? Shimin Linglan suddenly took a deep breath and was depressed. How could there be such a powerful secret method? A hidden fisher became a law enforcer. I can't keep up with this idiot speed at all. Others said that Han Fei didn't become a law enforcer, but Han Fei was a little confused. Did I become a law enforcer? Han Fei knew that he didn't become a law enforcer, but he always felt that he could. Or rather, he felt that he was already a law enforcer. When Han Fei felt a trace of law descend, that mysterious power was directly reflected in his mind. For some reason, Han Fei suddenly felt his body become light. He held his head and fell from the giant's shoulder. Fortunately, the giant reacted in time and quickly caught Han Fei with his hand. In Han Fei's dream, he saw a glaring King Kong. That pair of eyes was staring at him and kept staring at him. For some reason, the two of them had been staring at each other. However, he felt a little strange. Why did this golden glaring King Kong seem to be looking at him? Wang Han, idiot, idiot. Are you awake? I saw your eyelids trembling." A familiar voice echoed in his ears. Han Fei opened his eyes in a daze, only to see a huge head hanging a few meters above his head. "Shoot!" Han Fei shuddered and shouted subconsciously. Shan Tu. Shimin Linglan. Unfortunately, Han Fei just shouted and then scratched his head. Why did I fall asleep? Shan Tu's thunderous voice said, Brother, the priest said that you were too tired from fighting and fell asleep. Han Fei thought, when did I become your brother? My mother couldn't have given birth to a child as big as you. Shimin Linglan rolled her eyes. Did you dream of something again? Han Fei blinked. I'm staring at a golden statue. Shimin Linglan looked at Han Fei's silly look and sighed. Forget it. It's useless to ask. You have slept for the whole afternoon. Shan Tu grinned. Brother, you woke up at the right time. Tonight, our tribe will hold a bonfire sacrifice. We can have a good meal. Get up. Let's go. Shimin Linglan covered her nose. The smell from Shan Tu's big mouth was really unpleasant. Han Fei didn't seem to want to see Shan Tu's big mouth either. He turned over and sat up. I'm hungry. Let's eat. Shan Tu followed Han Fei and Shimin Linglan. He took a few steps forward and waited for Han Fei and Shimin Linglan, fearing that they would disappear if he walked too fast. Shimin Linglan said in a low voice, The war giants are fighting. The sea race has indeed attacked the 100,000 mountains. It's said that they have sent out venerables. Therefore, the battle this time is unprecedentedly grand. The beasts, the sky race, the war giants, and the demonic plant clan have all the mountain giants in the 100,000 mountains to the battlefield. The rest are the reserve forces. Once something goes wrong in the battle, these people will have to leave the 100,000 mountains and go to the human world from the direction of the jungle. Shimin Linglan explained the current situation of the 100,000 mountains to Han Fei. Although she knew that Han Fei wouldn't understand, she still had to tell Han Fei about it since she asked Shan Tuesday. What did a venerable look like? Shimin Linglan knew and had seen a venerable before, but she had never seen a venerable in action. However, since they had fought to such a high level, it meant that this battle was really grand, so these races began to prepare a way out for themselves. This was also the reason why the heavenly red hibiscus appeared in the middle of the jungle. Because there were living beings moving in the 100,000 mountains, the movement was so great that the plants that could move began to move away. As for those ordinary creatures, they didn't dare to fight with the creatures in the 100,000 mountains, so they could only move to the middle of the jungle. When the creatures that came out of the 100,000 mountains returned to the 100,000 mountains, they would return to the depths of the jungle. The so-called bonfire sacrifice was an activity that was half a sacrifice and half a meal. According to Shan Tu, such activities were often held. From time to time, giant children rushed to Han Fei and the others and shouted, Human, are you awake? Human, why are you so small but so powerful? Human, did you faint from hunger today? Don't worry, there will be a lot of delicious food later. Human, is the human world fun? The group of children asked a lot of questions, and Han Fei didn't know how to answer them. Shan Tu said, Go, go, go. Play somewhere else and get ready for dinner. There was a special altar for the bonfire sacrifice. It was the place closest to the giant city, a huge square half-pyramid platform. When Han Fei and the others arrived, many people greeted them and made way for them, saying that they could sit in the front. Because the altar was too big, not many people stayed in the clan. Therefore, there were only 2 or 3 people sitting more than 30 meters apart around a huge bonfire. Because everyone credited Shan Tu's breakthrough to Han Fei, even Shan Tu himself thought so. Therefore, everyone felt that Shan Tu was obliged to take Han Fei and the others to have a big meal and to guide them. Shan Tu pointed to a bonfire in the front row and said, Let's sit here. Look, it's already being roasted. Shimin Linglan was shocked. What are they roasting? A squid up to 30 meters long, a row of big white prawns 7 or 8 meters long, and a fiery fish 10 meters long. On the edge of the fire pit, there was also a circle of spiritual energy muscles. The corners of Shimin Linglan's mouth twitched. Although she could eat a lot now, the war giants were really gluttonous, right? Shimin Linglong sniffed. We don't have enough garlic on us. However, Shan Tu took out a box out of nowhere, which was full of spiritual fruit. There were all kinds of fruits, some for replenishing spiritual energy, some for replenishing energy, some for replenishing spiritual power, and even some for replenishing the soul. Of course, in addition to these, there were also a lot of messy fruit. For example, Han Fei saw pineapples and fire peppers. Shan Tu chuckled and put the fruits in front of Han Fei. Brother, eat them. Han Fei was not a polite person, and Han Fei was not a polite person. Since Shan Tu asked him to eat them, then he would eat them. Han Fei immediately grabbed a spiritual energy fruit and stuffed it into his mouth, then grabbed a handful for Shimin Linglong and grabbed another handful for himself. Shimin Linglong winked. Hey, idiot, he's being polite. How can you grab them like this? Haha. Shimin Linglong only felt tired. She glanced at Shan Tu and found that he was also a fool. Although he was tall, he was just a fool. Shimin Linglong felt that Shan Tu could swallow this basket of spiritual fruits if he opened his big mouth. Silence. The giant priest on the altar shouted, Everyone must pray and be devout. Shan Tu and all the giants around the bonfire put a finger between their eyebrows, leaned forward and raised their necks. Han Fei was still eating and pulled Shimin Linglong. Let's do it together. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. Han Fei swallowed the last spiritual energy fruit and then made this strange gesture. The great god of war, the 100,000 mountains, the earth's eyes, the ancient waves in the distant Blackstone cities gaze, under the holy city of giants gaze. I pray for the war's victory. I pray for the king's peace. 3 Pray for the warriors to return to their homeland. IV Pray for the mountains to never be destroyed. May you listen to the prayers of your people. May your glory be eternal. Please give us your oracle. All the giants around the bonfire murmured, Please give us your oracle. Han Fei and Shimin Linglong raised their heads and shouted after Shan Tuesday. In the next moment, when the two of them thought the ritual was about to end with a swoosh, flames hundreds of meters high burst out of the altar, illuminating the sky and extremely hot. Han Fei stretched out one hand and created a water wall, protecting Shimin Linglong in it. Shimin Linglong grinned. Idiot, you're quite active at this moment. The fire didn't burn me. After a while, Shan Tu mumbled, Hey! The great god of war didn't give us an oracle. Han Fei shivered slightly. God of war? What a familiar name. Although the god of war and the god of war had similar meanings, they sounded completely different in Han Fei's ears. Therefore, when Shan Tu said the god of war, a vague image of a little fatty suddenly appeared in Han Fei's mind. Suddenly, a child shouted, Words! There are words. Even the giant priestess didn't have any hope. This kind of ritual had been held countless times, but the god of war never responded. When a child said the word, there, the priestess suddenly looked back. There seemed to be a shadow in the flames. The shadow looked like the word, human. It was quiet at the bonfire ritual. Everyone was staring at the raging flames in a daze. In the next moment, the crowd exploded. Roar! God of war, the god of war didn't abandon us. Your devout people are always here. The crowd went crazy. For example, Shan Tu stood up and pounded his chest with his fist. His voice was so loud that it shook the heavens. Han Fei removed the water barrier and looked at Shimin Linglong in bewilderment. Han Fei scratched his head. Human? Shimin Linglong's eyes glittered. Shan Tu told her in the afternoon that the tradition of the bonfire ritual had been going on for thousands of years, but there had never been any revelations. Because of this, the sacrificial ceremony had become a regular gathering festival. But why did the oracle appear today? Shimin Linglong's face turned dark. Coincidence? Impossible. How could it be so coincidental? Today, she and the idiot had just arrived here and the oracle appeared at night. Also, the oracle only had one word, human. No matter how stupid Shimin Linglong was, she would associate this word with the two of them. No, she would associate this word with Han Fei. Shimin Linglong looked at Han Fei, only to find that he had already broken open a spiritual energy muscle and was sprinkling spiritual fruit juice on it. At that time, she was in a bad mood. Besides Shimin Linglan, the giant leader and the giant priestess also looked at Han Fei. They automatically ignored Shimin Linglan, because the power Han Fei displayed at noon had won their approval. However, this didn't mean they approved of Shimin Linglan. In their eyes, Shimin Linglan was too weak. As the giant priestess looked at Han Fei, many giants also looked at Han Fei. Baji, Shimin Linglan blushed and pulled Han Fei up. Han Fei looked at her hesitantly. Noticing Shimin Linglan's strange expression, he looked around and found everyone was looking at him strangely. Gulp. Han Fei scratched his head. Why are you looking at me? Ow! Shan Tu roared. Brother, you are my brother from now on. Han Fei. Then, a large group of people surrounded him. Shan Tu had picked up Han Fei with his big hands and thrown him into the sky. Han Fei. Once, twice, 3 times. Shan Tu and the others found that Han Fei was gone. They looked up, only to find a pair of phantom glass stretching in the sky. Han Fei was lying in the air, flapping his wings so that he wouldn't fall. Han Fei scratched his head. Shimin Linglan kept saying that he was stupid, but in fact, the big guys down there were really stupid. When Shan Tu and the others saw that the person was gone, Shimin Linglan instantly flew up. Shimin Linglan. Idiot, catch me. I can't fly. Shan Tu roared at the sky, brother, come down. Han Fei shook his head, determined not to go down. Oh, get out of my way. The giant leader bellowed angrily, you bunch of idiots. You've scared the human race's honored guest. To be honest, when the giant leader saw the oracle, he felt completely different. At this moment, Han Fei was no longer a passerby in his eyes. After a series of punches and kicks, the giant leader kicked the group of people off their feet. Then, these people all went back to their bonfire stalls. At this moment, the giant leader put on a smile that he thought was perfect but was actually horrifying. He looked at Han Fei and Shimin Linglan. Little friend Wang Han, come down. Shimin Linglan reminded him, idiot, go down. After hearing Shimin Linglan's words, Han Fei landed on the ground. The leader pointed at Shan Tu angrily. You sit down. Don't move. Bam! Shan Tu sat on the ground, motionless. At this moment, the giant leader looked at the giant priestess, as if waiting for the priestess to speak. The priestess said in a low and inviolable voice, from today on, Wang Han and Shimin Linglan, you 2 human friends, are the guests of the venerable of the war giants. No one is allowed to offend you. Then, the priestess pointed at the giant leader. Tomorrow, take some people to the battlefield and find a way to call the king back. Han Fei said, I want to go to the battlefield. Shimin Linglan frowned and then pinched Han Fei's waist hard. What's wrong with you? Why do you want to go to the battlefield? That's where even the venerables are fighting. If you go there, you'll be killed by them. What should you do? Han Fei felt that he had been to the battlefield before, and he had seen it many times. For some reason, he just wanted to go there. The giant priestess was taken aback. Is it possible for Wang Han to change the situation of the battlefield? Although the chance seems small, what if it's possible? This is the instruction of the god. Or, the giants are not very smart. If it were human beings, they wouldn't let Han Fei go even if they had to tie him up. What if he went to the battlefield and the person was gone? How the hell was he going to find him? The priestess said, tomorrow, dispatch 200 people to escort the honored guest to the battlefield. Han Fei scratched his head and looked at Shimin Linglan, thinking, why did you pinch me? Shimin Linglan heaved a long sigh. She had no way to deal with this idiot. Go. I'm going too. The bonfire party began. Han Fei had already eaten a spiritual energy clam. At this moment, he was holding a huge squid tentacle in his hand. That squid had been eaten too. He glanced at the oily prawn and saw that Shan Tu had already raised the prawn and placed it in front of Han Fei. Shan Tu laughed. Ha ha! Han Fei laughed. Ha ha! Shimin Linglan. This night was destined to be a sleepless night. Han Fei and Shimin Lingman were arranged to stay in the largest tent. The tent was 50 meters tall, and there was a huge straw mat on the ground. The tent was filled with food, all contributed by the giant. Han Fei hadn't stopped eating since the bonfire party. Shimin Linglan had long discovered that Han Fei had an ability, which was to eat all the time. Slurp, slurp. Shimin Linglan couldn't eat so many of these high-energy creatures. At this moment, hearing Han Fei slurp left and right, she couldn't bear it anymore. Wang Han, shut up. You're not allowed to eat anymore. Shimin Linglan grabbed Han Fei and pushed him onto the huge bed. She put one hand on her waist and pointed at Han Fei with the other. Go to sleep. Slurp. Han Fei swallowed the last bit of prawn meat in his mouth. Shimin Linglan was stunned. This fellow was like a completely different person compared to the one who had fought 2 days ago. Shimin Linglan sat on the big meadow angrily and counted her fingers. Don't be impulsive tomorrow. Don't fight, don't run around, don't. You have to protect me. I'll die if he pokes me with his finger. Han Fei quickly shook his head. No. Shimin Linglan snorted. What do you mean? I'm only an intermediate hanging fisher. I can't even beat a child. If you don't protect me, I'll kill myself. Han Fei scratched his head. Then I'll protect you. Seeing Han Fei's promise, Shimin Linglan breathed a sigh of relief. As long as Han Fei promised. Otherwise, she might not be able to control him now. After all, she was only an intermediate hanging fisher, very weak. The night gradually fell. Han Fei was lying flat, staring at the top of the tent with wide eyes. After so many years, Han Fei actually had no time to sleep, and he didn't dare to sleep. Once, in the jungle of the remote wilderness, he had a headache and then fell asleep. When he woke up, he found that Shimin Linglan was covered in blood, fighting, and his body was pierced in many places. It was also at that time that the divine healing technique was really awakened and saved Shimin Linglan from the gates of hell. Since then, Han Fei didn't dare to sleep, not even a headache. Shimin Linglan rolled around twice and rolled to Han Fei's side. Why don't you sleep when you can sleep? Han Fei scratched his head and chuckled. I'm keeping watch. Shimin Linglan's heart ached. After so many years, the two of them were used to relying on each other. Not only did Han Fei not dare to sleep, but she also didn't dare to sleep. She was afraid that Han Fei would have a headache at any time. Han Fei felt an arm around him, and then he was hugged. Shimin Linglan said in a very low voice, Idiot, I don't care who you are. Anyway, I'll find your memory first, and then we'll go to my home to take revenge together. After that, let's go to the war giants, okay? Let's not go. I think Shan Tu and the others are good. Han Fei said slowly, revenge first, then find my memory. Although Han Fei still spoke slowly, he was very determined. For some reason, even Han Fei himself was a little afraid of the things in his head. Okay. I'll listen to you. Chomp. Suddenly, there was a sound of biting. However, the sound quickly stopped. Then, the sound turned into chewing sound. Gulyalu, Gulyalu, listening to the chewing sounds nearby and the snoring sounds in the distance, Shimin Linglan let out a long sigh. She couldn't sleep anymore. The next morning, both Shimin Linglan and Han Fei didn't sleep for a whole night. First, they couldn't sleep, and second, they were used to it and didn't dare to sleep. The two just hugged each other all night, neither of them talking. Dum, dum, dum. There was the sound of an earthquake. Shimin Linglan knew that the giants had gotten up and had to go to the battlefield. Although she didn't want to, Shimin Linglan still took a deep breath. Idiot, get up. Remember what I said last night. Don't fight. Protect me. Han Fei, okay. Second night. Asking for votes, end of this chapter. Chapter 11:21. The battlefield of the 100,000 mountains was actually not very far away, only more than 800 kilometers away. In other words, the reason why the war giants didn't live in the mountains was that they guarded the border between the 100,000 mountains and the sea. The giant leader led more than 200 giants running all the way, shaking the earth and mountains wherever they passed. Han Fei and Shimin Linglan were sitting on Shan Tu's shoulder, running as fast as lightning. Shan Tu hummed, "Brother, remember, don't attack when you get to the battlefield. It's very chaotic there." Shimin Linglan asked, "Shan Tu, can you describe what the battlefield looks like?" Shimin Linglan had never seen a battlefield before. She only knew that there were strong masters fighting in the sea in City. It was said that sometimes the sea was overturned and it was like a Shura battlefield. Shan Tu said innocently, "That's terrible. There are many huge creatures and the huge waves they make are even comparable to the mountain giant. However, the war giants are not bad either. We have the protection of the god of war. We can fight." Shimin Linglan sighed. Rather than letting Shan Tu describe the battlefield, she might as well see it herself. She found that most of the giants were similar to Han Fei. As for the mountain giants, she had never seen them, but she thought they must be very tall. He estimated that it would be as big as a few mountains. Only then could it be called a mountain giant, right? After running for about 500 kilometers, Han Fei saw a large sea of spiritual plants. "Zhan Qiu, aren't you guarding the war giants?" Before they entered this forbidden area, they saw vines rising and a green lotus blooming in the middle. The voice came from this green lotus. The giant leader said, "An oracle has come. Master Priest ordered us to go to the battlefield and find the giant king." "An oracle?" The green lotus was swaying. It seemed to be surprised. The spiritual plants opened a path. "I got it. Let's go." When Han Fei and the others stepped into the second half of the spiritual plants, they found that there were a large number of insect and marine shellfish remains here. Many of the colorful flowers and vines were also destroyed. Perhaps it could be said that the moment they arrived, they had already arrived at the battlefield. A large number of creatures rushed through the battlefield and broke into the spiritual plant. However, in this era where spirit plants also had intelligence and were very powerful, none of the creatures that managed to make it through the battlefield could break through the sea of spirit plants. Along the way, Han Fei and Shimin Linglan also saw many shellfish creatures charging into the 100,000 mountains. Roar! Unfortunately, under the feet of a group of giants, those who were lucky enough to break through the defensive line were swept away by a group of giants with huge axes and maces. Some were even directly trampled to death. When a large group of giants climbed to the top of a mountain and looked down from a towering cliff not far away, Han Fei and Shimin Linglan instantly sat up straight. The two of them looked at the scene in the distance in disbelief. Although it seemed to be far away, they could see an incomparably huge giant. Half of his body was submerged in the sea. A large hand pulled out a shark that was dozens of meters long from the sea. With just a squeeze of one hand, the shark was crushed. Bang! As the palm slapped the surface of the water, waves surged and surged in all directions. Ripples spread out on the surface of the sea. Countless creatures were killed by this slap. Is this the mountain giant? Shimin Linglan's eyes widened. How could she compare Shan Tu to the mountain giant? However, it was too exaggerated. There was no way they could compare. That would be a few hundred meters high. In addition to the shock that the mountain giant gave them, the sky was full of big birds. Almost every moment they could see big birds swooping down, clawing with sharp claws, piercing with sharp beaks, sweeping with blade-like wings, or sweeping with winged blades. Being so far away, Han Fei and the others naturally couldn't see how the creatures in the sea were killed. However, Han Fei could sense it. Every time the big birds attacked, almost a marine creature would die. Of course, although birds could fly, marine creatures weren't all weaklings. Some octopuses even tried to catch a big bird before they died. Once the bird was caught, once it fell into the sea, it would never be able to fly again. A large number of marine creatures would pounce on it and pull it to the bottom of the sea. Ho! Shan Tu shouted, "We've arrived at the battlefield." A group of giants, like a group of lunatics, rushed to the cliff and jumped down. The giant leader took the lead and shouted, "Protect the distinguished guests. We will not fight." Shan Tu also rushed to the cliff while howling. This cliff was like a 1,000-year-old cliff. It was more than 2,000 meters tall and abnormally steep. However, for these giants it was nothing at all. Figures fell from the sky one after another. Thud, thud, thud every time they landed. It caused a turbulence, which was very exciting. In midair, Han Fei and Shimen Linglan finally saw the scene of the battlefield. In fact, there was also a camp here. The battle was not going on all the time. Many giants were eating seafood near the bottom of the cliff, some giants were fighting on the beach, and many giants were attacking on the sea. Han Fei and the others were familiar with, such as War King's 8 Flash, War Fistlight, Mountain Defense Formation, and all kinds of powerful killer moves bombarded the sea. Ho! The giants in battle couldn't be compared with the giants in daily life at all. They were a group of lunatics, like madmen who had ignited their bloodline or gone berserk. They were the kind of people who fought wildly and killed everything in their way. Of course, although the combat power of the giants was terrifying, it didn't mean that they were invincible. Relatively speaking, the speed of the giants was relatively slow. Although their combat power was fast, once they were entangled and attacked by many creatures, it was common for them to be injured. "Zhan Qiu, why are you here?" "Zhan Qiu, are you crazy? Why did you bring so many people here?" "Asshole, we don't need the support of our tribe anymore. We have enough people." Are these two little guys humans?" Many giants who were eating suddenly stood up and stared at the giant leader. They were all talking at once and breathing heavily. This was what they had discussed before they came. "Someone must stay here, just in case." Wakaru, the giant leader, Zhan Qiu, roared, his voice like thunder. "The oracle has come. If our tribe doesn't perish, we will win this battle." Roar, roar, roar. The 200 giants that followed Han Fei and Shimen Linglan suddenly roared in a rhythmic manner. The roaring made Han Fei and Shimen Linglan's heads spin. It seemed that it was not good to be too loud. "What? The oracle has come? Huh? The oracle? Is the god of war coming back?" Roar! For a moment all the giants on the battlefield heard it. Including the mountain giant in the deep sea, it turned its head and burst out with an earth-shattering roar. When the mountain giant roared, it hammered its hands, and terrifying energy gathered on its fists. Like a heavenly fist, it blasted on the sea. Rumble! Under the hammer, the sea erupted and huge waves hundreds of meters high rushed in all directions at an incredible speed. When the giant leader shouted, "The oracle has come, we will win this battle," the whole battlefield was in an uproar. The battlefield of the war giants actually stretched far away. What Han Fei could see was the battle within 100 kilometers. But in Han Fei's perception, it was all the battlefield. Needless to say, it was also a battlefield. But the news of "the oracle has come, we will win this battle," was popping out of every giant's mouth. This news was like a fire in a winter night, igniting the entire battlefield in an instant. At that moment, the giants who were still eating grabbed the mace, giant axe, and saber around them and re-entered the battlefield. No one doubted what Zhan Qiu said. The giants' thinking was simple. If their tribe said the oracle had come, then it had come. And although Zhan Qiu and the others couldn't understand the oracle, however, the oracle appeared, and the hope in their hearts came back. It could be said that the momentum of the three armies was earth-shaking because of this sentence. A tsunami broke out, but it couldn't really hit the giants at all. The waves instantly drowned Han Fei and the others, slapping on the towering cliff, creating huge waves. Han Fei protected Shimen Linglan and scratched his head. "Is this the battlefield?" Zhang Qiu originally wanted to shout, "I'm here to find the king," but before he could shout, all the giants were stimulated by his words and went crazy. When the waves dispersed, Zhang Qiu finally realized what had happened. The more than 200 giants behind him breathed heavily. It must be known that on the battlefield, emotions were contagious. When all the giants were fighting crazily, they also couldn't help it. However, they also knew in their hearts that they were not here to fight, but to protect Han Fei, so they couldn't attack casually. Shimin Linglan had never seen such a scene before. Half of the mountain giant's body was several hundred meters tall, yet a single attack from it was enough to create such a terrifying tsunami. In the boiling sea, the giant with a big axe slashed the sea, and the roar that sounded like a war horn made even her, an intermediate hanging fisher, feel her heart skip a beat. Gulp! Shimin Linglan swallowed and exclaimed exactly the same as Han Fei. So, this is the battlefield. On the sea, Han Fei saw a giant's muscles bulging and directly tearing a big crab in half. There was also a giant who opened his mouth and bit down on a serpent, tearing off a piece of flesh. There was even a giant with a bloody aura on his body. He hammered a muscle with his mace and smashed it into pieces. Zhang Qiu was stunned for a long time. Finally, he came to himself and shouted, "My king, are you there? My king!" Deep in the sea, a huge white clam was floating on the sea. A beautiful woman was standing inside the mussel. She was wearing a milky white dress that covered 100 meters and covered the entire mussel. Near this big clam, there was a one-horned shark, on which stood a fishman with sharp teeth, holding 2 revolving blades in his hands. There was also a mermaid standing on the sea, holding a long spear and looking into the distance. Behind them, there was a large group of backup shrimp soldiers and crab generals, black turtles, and blade manta rays. The woman in the clam said casually, "Oracle? Didn't the gods fall 30,000 years ago? How could there be an oracle?" The fishman said coldly, "It must be a scam of the war giants. They just want to boost morale." The mermaid man shook his head gently. "The war giants won't play such tricks. Once can boost morale, but what about twice? With their brains, the price of disappointment is much higher than a moment of excitement." The woman in the clam was silent for a while, and suddenly looked into the sky. "Giant King, you are here, right?" "Ah." Swish, the sky was torn apart. Before the person arrived, the voice came first. "Little clam monster, your intuition is quite accurate. I heard the news and immediately informed the Beast King and the others. Did you hear that? You want to enter the 100,000 mountain with an oracle? Look at who you are." The clam girl sneered. 30,000 years ago, the gods fell and all races died. Who doesn't know that? Now, your war clan wants my sea clan to retreat just because of a groundless oracle? A 40-meter tall man with bulging muscles, like a super-muscular giant, jumped out of the void. Boom! The giant king stood proudly in the sea with 2 square war hammers in his hands. The war race never lies. If we say it's an oracle, it must be an oracle. Little girl, you are 3 mid-level venerables. Are you going to attack us by force? Before the clam girl could reply, the fish-headed man pointed at the giant king and said, "The vast ocean will be conquered by the sea race. When the giant deep-sea demons come, you will be nothing but clowns." Roar! The giant king roared, "Where did this fish-headed kid come from? If you are so capable, ask the deep-sea demons to come. Let's see if the 100,000 mountain is afraid of him." The fish-headed man bared his teeth. "I am looking forward to the day when the 100,000 mountain is destroyed." At this moment, the mermaid man said lightly, "There are humans among the war giants? It seems that you have started to make contact with humans, but it also means that you are starting to feel guilty." The giant king sneered. "What can 2 kids mean? When did the 100,000 mountain ever need the help of humans? So, to fight or not to fight?" The mermaid man looked at the clam girl. "Retreating without fighting is not the style of the sea race." The clam girl's eyes were cold. She slowly raised her hand and said firmly, "Attack!" When the clam girl gave the order, hundreds of serpents roared and rolled on the surface of the sea. The prawn soldiers and crab generals all entered the water. The giant king roared, "You are courting death." The two war hammers in the giant king's hands flashed with lightning. The world was like a hammer that suddenly smashed down. Star realm. Blood explosion. Azure wave strike. The three venerables attacked at the same time. A green jade space instantly isolated the space. In an instant, the giant king fought the three venerables alone. Roar. When the green jade space was about to be sealed, the giant king roared, "Mountain divine art, war god horn. Launch an all-out attack." The giant king's voice reverberated in the void. Almost at the same time, on the other side of the battlefield, a mountain-like ape hit the sea and roared, "All beasts attack! Kill your way into the sea." In the sea, a giant fish that was more than 1,000 meters long leaped out of the water. The moment it came out of the water, its fins turned into wings, and its scales turned into feathers. It soared up and turned into a bird that blocked the sun and the sky. The sky race, devour the world. Launch an all-out attack. On the other side of the battlefield, vines and grasses covered the sea, and countless white flowers were blooming. Heavenly vines were uprooted into the sea, 9-headed snake grass was moving mountains, the fragrance of konjac spread for thousands of miles, and billions of butterflies covered the sea. A crisp voice echoed, "The demonic plant clan, launch an all-out attack." Speaking of which, Zhang Qiu shouted several times in the same place, but no one responded. So, he said to them, "My king is either fighting with the Beast King or fighting with the Beast King. He will definitely respond." As soon as Zhang Qiu said that, a thunderous voice echoed in the void. "Mountain divine art, war god horn. Launch an all-out attack." Zhang Qiu was dumbfounded. An all-out attack? Almost all the war giants on the battlefield roared, "All-out attack! Kill!" Who, in Han Fei's perception, another mountain giant appeared. It was 1,000 meters tall, holding a large curved horn in its hand, and blew at the sky. Woo! Woo! Wherever the sound wave passed, all the giants who were shrouded suddenly had a stronger aura. Not just the war giants, but even Han Fei and Shimen Linglan felt warm, and their strength was increasing. Han Fei felt that he was much stronger and seemed to have the combat power of a peak-level hidden fisher. Shimen Linglan's improvement was even greater. She was directly pulled into the realm of a hidden fisher. The mountain giant below them roared, its muscles bulging, and explosive power overflowed from its body. The mountain giant in the sea began to stride into the sea. After striding for dozens of kilometers, it suddenly disappeared into the sea. Then, the sea rose and a mountain emerged from the water. The terrifying energy tore the seawater apart. The gigantic mountain giant had already leaped into the air with the mountain on its back. Gudu! Both Han Fei and Shimen Linglan swallowed. The mountain giant was so big. How could it jump? At this moment, it leaped tens of thousands of meters, carried the mountain, and smashed the mountain into the deep sea. In short, the moment the horn of the war god sounded, the whole battlefield went crazy. In the distance, there was a nuclear explosion. Nearby, vines spread down from the cliff. In the sky, thousands of birds swooped down as if they were committing suicide. Zhang Qiu's eyes were bloodshot, and he forcibly suppressed his fighting spirit. "Don't move. Protect the honored guest." Bam! 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 Rip! Bam! 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 Han Fei saw a big octopus clinging to a war giant, a centipede curling its body, a big fish biting its waist, and a pair of pincers clamping its feet. Rip! The giant tore the octopus with both hands, and the mace flashed with a strange light, smashing the big fish to death. It opened its big mouth and bit through the body of the centipede. Gotcha! However, the giant failed to resist the pincers, and one of its legs was clamped open. Oh! The mace hammered the big crab 3 times in a row, smashing it into pieces. But after that, the giant also knelt in the sea. Then, giant pythons coiled around it and big bugs bit it. No matter how hard the giant struggled and tore apart many creatures, it couldn't stand up in the end. Han Fei was shocked. He was very anxious. Shan Tu and the others were also very anxious. Han Fei clenched his fists, scratched his head, and looked at Shimin Linglan from time to time. Shimin Linglan gritted her teeth, and her face was dark. She knew that Han Fei was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. As long as she said the word, Han Fei would definitely rush to the battlefield. However, she didn't want to say anything. Although she had never seen a battlefield before, the situation in front of her wasn't something that 1 or 2 people could control. However, seeing Han Fei's anxious look, she couldn't bear to refuse. Shimin Linglan was also anxious. She didn't know what to do. No, Wang Han is an idiot. He doesn't know anything. After taking a few deep breaths, Shimin Linglan suddenly said to Zhang Qiu, I can help, but Senior Zhang Qiu must protect Wang Han. Zhang Qiu's eyes were bloodshot from the god of war horn. If he wasn't strong enough to suppress himself, he would have rushed out already. Hearing this, Zhang Qiu shouted, I will protect him personally. Sigh. Shimin Linglan looked at Han Fei deeply, and a sad expression appeared on her face. Go. But remember, you are only allowed to save people. You are not allowed to fight. You are not allowed to die. If you die, I will die too. Han Fei nodded. He jumped onto the ground and stomped on the ground. Buzz, buzz, buzz. One after another, the coiled turtle formations appeared. A large spirit-gathering formation protected her, and a killing formation surrounded her. Before leaving, he didn't forget to protect Shimin Linglan. Zhang Qiu held his axe and pointed at Shan Tuesday. Shan Tu, guard this place. If a single strand of hair falls, I will kill you. What? Shan Tu was already prepared to run. However, after being pointed at by Zhang Qiu, his breathing became unstable. An 18-meter-tall giant was actually bawling his eyes out. Because of Shimin Linglan's decision, a strange scene suddenly appeared on the battlefield. They watched as a tiny human spread its glassy wings and flew on the surface of the sea. Behind him, more than 100 giants rushed forward and crushed everything in their way. Wherever they passed, there were broken bodies everywhere. No creature could stop them. A peak-level hidden fisher, had a great record. In just a few days of fighting, he had killed more than 100 creatures and torn apart a beginner law enforcer lobster. The blade of his axe was bent. Just now, he tore apart 3 big octopuses, 2 sea scorpions, and a big centipede. His legs had been bitten out of shape. He knew that maybe in 100 seconds, he would fall into the sea and never come out again. However, he didn't panic at all. He could still kill a group of sea creatures and his kids could still live. It would be great if he could eat meat every day. When he was about to fight, he saw the waves surging and a palm-sized human leading hundreds of people came roaring over. Isn't there too many of them? A 6 was dumbfounded. Is this guy here to help me? I don't need so many people on my side. Swish. Swish. The person at the front suddenly appeared, and 2 white beams of light fell directly. A 6 only felt that his strength was returning, and his wounds were healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Huh. Sacrifice to the holy light? In the eyes of giants, they could recover quickly if they were injured. However, only a giant shaman would be able to recover so quickly. Before a 6 could react, he saw more than 100 people sweeping wildly, directly killing all the sea creatures within 100 meters. Before a 6 could ask, Han Fei had already flown away. Behind Han Fei, Zhang Qiu shouted, "Follow him to the next place." Swish. In this area, only a 6 was dumbfounded. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, I don't have to die. After thinking about it, a 6 roared and rushed to the new creatures that emerged not far away again. Han Fei remembered Shimin Linglan's words. One person was useless on such a large battlefield, but he could save people. Han Fei had never thought about where the spiritual energy came from. Anyway, he felt that he had a lot of spiritual energy. Besides, for some reason, he always felt that he was absorbing the spiritual energy on this battlefield. In Shimin Linglan's eyes, Han Fei had already disappeared. Therefore, Shimin Linglan kept asking Shan Tuesday. Shan Tu turned from a law enforcement giant into an artificial map. They're 80 kilometers to the east. Good job, Zhan Qiu is really powerful. Not good, there's a law enforcement lobster, and the lobster has been killed. Not good, there's a law enforcement centipede, and the centipede has been killed. Shimin Linglan was speechless, and then she heard Shan Tu talking next to her. Every time Shan Tu mentioned law enforcement creatures, her heart would tighten. However, the next sentence Shan Tu said was that law enforcement something had been killed. This made Shimin Linglan feel relieved. This at least meant that Zhan Qiu and the others had been protecting Han Fei, and the law enforcement powerhouses shouldn't be able to hurt Han Fei. Rumble. The mountain giant was besieged by 3 Dao-seeking state creatures, which were at the level of explorers. However, the mountain giants were much stronger than they had imagined. They seemed to have indestructible bodies. Their loud roars were accompanied by rolling thunder, like an N-level shock wave. Even the explorers couldn't do anything to them. In particular, the mountain giants were also hungry, but they didn't panic. When fighting, they could randomly grab a creature and stuff it into their mouths, replenishing their energy while fighting. After only half an hour, Han Fei and the others ran out of Shan Tu's perception range. For some reason, Han Fei felt that he was very used to this kind of battlefield. When he rushed all the way, it was inevitable that he would be attacked by creatures, so Han Fei had a long knife array around him to clear the way. None of the creatures at the level of Hidden Fisher could resist Han Fei's attack. Once he encountered a law enforcement creature, Zhan Qiu would take action and cleave the way with his axe. Han Fei couldn't remember how many giants he had saved, but whenever he saw an injured one, he would cast the divine healing technique on it. Even Zhan Qiu was surprised. Could human beings have infinite spiritual energy? Less than half an hour later, when a large number of shrimp soldiers and crab generals came to him from the sea, Han Fei suddenly stopped. Shrimp soldiers and crab generals? Han Fei suddenly covered his head. In his memory, he seemed to have seen such creatures more than once. Zhan Qiu thought that Han Fei was exhausted. Immediately, Zhan Qiu shouted, "Turn back, turn back!" Zhan Qiu, who had run for more than 2,000 kilometers, carried Han Fei on his shoulder and led the group of people to run back crazily. A giant shouted, "He must be hungry. He looks like he's going to faint from hunger. I'll kill a big shrimp to nourish him later." An orc took out a large piece of jerky out of nowhere and stuffed it in front of Han Fei while running. "Brother, meat, meat." Han Fei shook his head and looked at the hard-roasted fish. He immediately lost his appetite. Han Fei said, "I'm not hungry." Zhan Qiu quickly said, "Boy, you've consumed too much energy. You need to rest. Even a giant wouldn't be able to withstand the holy light that you cast. Listen to me. Let's go back first." Whether Han Fei was willing or not, Zhan Qiu carried Han Fei and ran all the way. At this time, in the distance, a mountain giant roared and was fighting a weird 3-headed dragon python beast. The 3 giant dragons were also quite large, but they weren't even at the Exalt realm, and their strength was roughly on par with that of the mountain giant. One of the dragon heads bit the mountain giant's arm, dripping with blood, and the mountain giant punched one of the heads while roaring at the other head. A giant and a behemoth were rolling in the sea. None of the creatures nearby dared to approach them, because they might be crushed to death if they were not careful. Han Fei was carried and looked over, only to see that the scorching dragon's breath was spewing out, and the mountain giant was holding a dragon's neck with each hand, roaring at the dragon head in the middle, and then the two began to bite each other. The 2 dragons' necks were almost crushed by the mountain giant. However, the mountain giant's chest and neck were almost torn apart too. Oh, God's roar! In Han Fei's round eyes, he saw that the mountain giant suddenly glowed with a golden light, and it opened its arms to both sides. Pooh! Pooh! The two dragon heads were torn off by the mountain giant. If it were the old Han Fei, he would have cursed at this scene. This power was too terrifying. The mountain giant grabbed the last head of the three-headed dragon python with both hands and slapped it on the surface of the sea. In that scene, the creatures that were hundreds of meters away were clapping and exploding on the surface of the sea. Every bombardment was accompanied by a tsunami. While running, Zhang Qiu shouted, "The mountain giants are very strong. Even the venerables dare not say that they can kill them at once. In the same realm, it is very difficult for any living being to kill them." However, as soon as Zhang Qiu said that, Han Fei suddenly disappeared and landed on the surface of the sea. The coiled turtle array rose crazily. Han Fei looked at the three-headed dragon in the distance. "Explode!" Zhang Qiu shouted, "Come on, block in front of Wang Han. Mountain defense array." Oh! Rumble, just when Han Fei drew a great plate turtle array, and when Zhang Qiu and the others pushed out a mountain defense array together, a violent explosion released dazzling white light and the roar was earth-shattering. Almost in an instant, huge waves and storms swept over 100 kilometers. All the creatures in this sea area, whether they were shrimp soldiers, crab generals, or lone war giants, melted in this terrifying explosion. Han Fei and the others were about 50 kilometers away from the explosion. However, at this moment they still felt the appalling power. Zhang Qiu and the others were retreating. The mountain defense array was full of cracks, and the storm was still raging. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. The mountain defense grand array lasted for 8 breaths of time before shattering. But at this moment the great plate turtle array rose, and with continuous cracking sounds, 6 arrays were broken in a row. Just when the 7th array was about to be broken, Han Fei suddenly found that Zhang Qiu roared and a group of war giants gathered together against the storm, protecting Han Fei in it. Crack, crack, crack. But in less than 2 minutes, the great plate turtle array was blown up. Puff! Many giants vomited blood, and their flesh and blood were scorched. The mountain defense array was about to be activated, but it was blown up as soon as it appeared. While setting up the array, Han Fei cast the divine healing technique on Zhang Qiu and the others. Swish, swish, swish. He didn't know how many divine healing techniques he had used, but it lasted for more than 2 minutes. Although the aftermath was fierce, it was not fatal. Except for Zhang Qiu, the other giants all lay in the sea, exhausted. Zhang Qiu supported his body and shook his head. When he saw Han Fei, he grinned. "I'm glad you're okay." Han Fei looked into the distance. "He's seriously injured." Han Fei was referring to the mountain giants. After all, those who could cause such a violent explosion were at least peak-level explorers, or even higher. 50 kilometers away there was such a strong impact. How could the mountain giants in the center not be injured? Zhang Qiu was about to stop Han Fei, when he saw Han Fei disappear with a swish. He activated the agility of wind and rushed to the center of the explosion at an incredible speed. Zhang Qiu and the others were not seriously injured, but they were a little exhausted. After all, Han Fei had given them a lot of divine healing technique. "Ho!" Zhang Qiu pounded the ground with his hands, suddenly got up, and ran after him. Han Fei stood on the chest of the mountain giant. He was blasted to a place only 20 kilometers away from the sea by the terrifying explosion. With Han Fei's speed, he might not be able to reach it in the blink of an eye, but it would only take him a few minutes. And this was the first time Han Fei looked at this giant at such a close distance. His skin was as hard as a mountain rock. Even if he was seriously injured, his vitality was still terrifying. The mountain giant's big face was badly mutilated. Han Fei cast the divine healing technique crazily, and Han Fei's figure flickered in the air. Every place that was seriously injured was always accompanied by the divine healing light. However, the effect was not as good as that of ordinary giants. Perhaps because the mountain giant was too strong, one of its big eyes slowly moved at this moment, as if it wanted to look at Han Fei. However, because it was too seriously injured, it couldn't move. Han Fei had never encountered such a situation. The divine healing technique was effective, but it was equivalent to using the power of the most law enforcers to save a huge creature that was comparable to a venerable. Almost out of instinct, Han Fei chose to give up this method of treatment. He jumped to the sea and stretched out his hand, and an oval water ball gradually enveloped the mountain giant. When Zhang Qiu arrived, he looked around vigilantly with his giant axe, guarding Han Fei and the mountain giant. It was very easy for Han Fei to control water to a kilometer. Above the ball of water, waves rippled as rays of godly healing light descended. Hundreds of rays of godly healing light were thrown into the ball of water, which was filled with dense vitality. Zhang Qiu roared, "Brother, are you done? Creature is coming." The fall of a mountain giant was of great significance. Han Fei had only treated it for less than half an hour. How could it be so fast? After all, a law enforcer couldn't heal an explorer. Besides, Han Fei was not a real law enforcer. In the sky, a dense flock of birds began to swoop down. On the shore, the 100 giants were stuffing jerky into their mouths while sprinting at Han Fei. Ho! More than 100 giants lined up and turned into a human wall, blocking Han Fei and the mountain giant. Vines emerged from the water, dragging the water ball, trying to pull the mountain giant to the shore. Han Fei continued to cast the divine healing technique, occasionally looking at the giants, the big birds in the sky, and occasionally at the vines. Suddenly, he felt that the creatures in the 100,000 mountains were not bad. The third chapter. Each chapter is 9,000 words, which is equivalent to 9 chapters in a row. It's not too much to ask for a monthly vote, is it? End of this chapter. Chapter 11:22. With the mountain giant as a landmark, the birds of the sky clan tore apart half of the sea ahead. However, Han Fei had no time to be distracted at this moment. He had cast a lot of divine healing technique into the water and applied it to the mountain giant. Han Fei's treatment made the surface injuries of the mountain giant recover rapidly. Many of the giants were dumbfounded by this scene. Han Fei was such a young man, yet he could even deal with the mountain giant? However, Han Fei used to treat human beings, and the war giant's healing speed was not that fast anymore. What others saw was just a superficial phenomenon. Therefore, if he wanted to heal quickly, he had to continue casting the divine healing technique. On the mountain giant's side, although its external injuries were recovering quickly, it didn't feel anything until half an hour later. After all, the recovery of the flesh didn't play a decisive role. At this time, Zhang Qiu and the others had already started fighting. The mountain giant was already able to raise an arm, and he even twisted his head twice. Zhang Qiu roared, "We can't go on like this. Are there any strong masters to support us?" In the sky, a crisp bird cry sounded. Reinforcements are already coming. 2 explorers have been stopped. Demonic plant clan, hurry up. At this moment, the mountain giant had been dragged to about 10 kilometers offshore. In the sky and in the sea, fierce battles had already broken out. A green lotus bloomed, and 7 lotus seeds turned into swords of light, besieging a big lobster. In the sky, an eagle pounced on a snake with thousands of feathers like swords. In the domain, a giant python spewed flames and fought fiercely. On this side, the mountain giant was gradually able to move slightly, and its recovery speed was getting faster and faster. It seemed that the strong masters of the Sea Clan were also anxious. A large number of starry sea-flying fish broke through the waves and flashed in the void. Although many of them were blocked by the big birds, more than half of them flashed over. In addition to the starry sea-flying fish, many insects drilled from the bottom of the sea and rushed out of the nearby sea. Living beings from all directions seemed to be converging here. The death of a mountain giant was definitely a huge victory. After all, in a sense, the mountain giant could be regarded as half a venerable, or rather, a venerable with a physical body. How many venerables were there in the 100,000 mountains? The total number of mountain giants was less than 100. The death of such an expert was of great significance. One of the starry sea-flying fish flew through the air for dozens of kilometers and arrived at the coastal area. It opened its mouth and a huge clam flew out. Not good, explorer. Some explorers tried to use this method to break through the layers of blockades, and it succeeded. As soon as the clamshell opened, the vortex that looked like a black hole was mainly aimed at Han Fei. Because Han Fei was the only one who could heal. Without Han Fei, the mountain giant would probably be dead now. Pu. Pearls flew out of the muscle one after another, accompanied by demonic sounds. Zhan Qiu, protect Wang Han. A war giant jumped out and stood in front of Han Fei. In the end, in that instant, thousands of pearls exploded, and like scalding arrows, they directly pierced through the giant. In an instant, his body was riddled with holes. No! Han Fei yelled and tried to flash over, but he was pushed back by a blast of air, and then vines entangled him. Humph! A mere clam demon. A giant hammer suddenly protruded from the void. With a shake of the hammer, the explorer-level clam demon was smashed into pieces. The poor clam demon must have had a lot more abilities to perform, but it was hammered to death after killing a war giant. When the sledgehammer descended, it also sealed the void around it so that the attack wouldn't hurt the people around. The phantom of the giant king illuminated the void and laughed aloud. Do you really think the three of you can stop me? Fishhead, I'm going to smash you. Many people raised their heads, only to see that half of the sky had been turned into a giant hammer. The void was split apart. First, two giant wheels were shattered, and then a gigantic shark's head was smashed by the hammer and exploded. At that moment, the void crack formed a vortex, and Han Fei seemed to see the rebirth of a drop of blood. However, it was soon suppressed by the giant king. Rumble! The sky was covered in blood. The venerable level expert died, and the clouds were dyed with blood. The weather suddenly changed, and the wind howled as if the sky were crying. Almighty my king! Oh! Kill! The giant king laughed. You three don't dare to provoke the beast king. Do you think I'm easy to deal with? Since you're here, don't leave. A jade-colored barrier blocked the void, but it was smashed by the giant king's punch. The sledgehammer was raised again, and thunder rumbled. Kacha, retreat! As a cold voice echoed, the members of the sea races all began to retreat. Retreat, retreat. Shan Tu, is Wang Han back? Shimin Linglan had asked this question 100 times. Shan Tu smashed a crab that tried to escape and said in a low voice, Not yet, but we won. However, our race has won. The oracle is right. Let's go find him. Shimin Linglan pulled out the twin knives from the body of a big scorpion and jumped on Shan Tu's shoulder. Okay. The giant king killed a venerable level expert, and the whole race cheered. In the void, a voice echoed, Old Gu, why did you only kill one? The giant king roared at the void, Why don't you try? I seriously injured one. As he spoke, the giant smashed the sea with his sledgehammer and cursed, The venerables can run, but the rest can stay here. Wave after wave of tsunamis pounced on the mountain giant. The explorers could tear the void to escape, but the law enforcers couldn't. They were all smashed to death by the sky-reaching giant hammer one by one. Wang Han, Shan Tu was running wildly. Shimin Linglan stood on Shan Tu's shoulder and rushed to Han Fei. Han Fei looked back, scratched his head, and smiled. Brother, I'm coming. Shimin Linglan jumped off Shan Tu's shoulder and kicked Han Fei's calf. Where did you go? Han Fei chuckled and pointed at the mountain giant. At this moment, the big man could barely stand up. Because the battle here was over, Han Fei didn't continue healing. At this moment, He knew that the divine healing technique couldn't be healed instantly. His healing should be enough. He had to wait for the mountain giant to recover for a while. After all, the battle was over. What was there to be afraid of? Just now, because the battle was fierce, Han Fei kept casting the divine healing technique. Thud, thud, thud. Elsewhere, a mountain giant came over. Seeing that the mountain giant was fine, it sat in the sea, picked up a handful of remains of marine creatures, and began to stuff them into its mouth. Shimin Linglan looked around and took Han Fei's hand. "Are you all right?" Han Fei nodded. "I'm fine." Shimin Linglan let out a sigh of relief. "Trying to show off? Look at how badly injured the mountain giant is. How strong are you?" Bam! While Shimin Linglan was scolding Han Fei, the ground shook again. A giant more than 40 meters tall smashed the ground with 2 war hammers. My king, Zhan Qiu shouted. "My king!" The oracle appeared. The giant king was looking at Han Fei. Hearing Zhan Qiu's loud shout, he glared at him. "Lower your voice." "What did the oracle say?" Zhan Qiu hurriedly lowered his voice. "Human." The giant king asked, "Human what?" Zhan Qiu replied, "Just one word." The giant king looked at Han Fei again, and looked him up and down, slightly confused. However, he still nodded in satisfaction. "Human boy, not bad. You actually saved me. I can't find many humans who are more capable than you. Haha, later I'll get you a few big dragons to nourish your body." Han Fei chuckled. "Okay." The giant king was taken aback and couldn't help but mumble, "Yo, you're not pretentious at all. Not bad. Well, let's talk about it when we return to the clan. Now, everyone should be hungry." The giant king roared, "Boys, we've won this battle. Everyone is hungry. Let's get something to eat. After eating, let's go home." In the void, a voice echoed, "Old B** starred, come and help." The giant king said in surprise, "Old monkey, you haven't finished yet?" As he spoke, the giant king tore the void apart, stepped out, and disappeared. Shimin Linglan took Han Fei's hand and secretly stuck out her tongue. Too strong. Although the giant king didn't notice her, when he stood in front of her, Shimin Linglan's back was full of cold sweat. On the contrary, Han Fei didn't feel anything. Clatter! At this time, a big hand grabbed from the sea and a broken mussel was picked up. Then, the big hand put the mussel in front of Han Fei. This big hand, of course, belonged to the mountain giant. At this moment, he was already able to sit up and his body was recovering rapidly. Although he was very hungry, he still grabbed food for Han Fei first and said in a daze, "Eat." After that, the mountain giant grabbed a 100-meter-long serpent from the sea and bit it, tearing off a chunk of its flesh and swallowing it. Shimin Linglan looked at the big mussel that was 70 or 80 meters long in front of her. "How can I eat it?" Han Fei scratched his head, stretched out his hand, and burned it with spiritual fire. Then, he grabbed some seaweed, squeezed out the juice, and began to roast it. An explorer-level mussel. This kind of creature didn't need any seasoning at all and its taste was extremely delicious. However, with Han Fei's current physique, he couldn't eat much. And Shimin Linglan could only take a bite at most. Shan Tu looked at the mussel meat and drooled. Even Zhan Qiu was drooling. This was an explorer-level creature. Who could bear it? Han Fei raised his head and grinned. "Let's eat together later." Eating cooked food or eating raw food was a matter of attitude. In fact, giants also liked to eat cooked food. However, sometimes when they were too hungry, they would choose to eat it raw and didn't want to wait. After all, in the war, they consumed a lot of energy. If they really waited for the food to be roasted, they might be killed by the enemy. Therefore, giants were also used to eating raw food. At this time, Shan Tu and the others watched the big mussel being roasted. However, it was not easy to cook a creature of this level. Han Fei frowned slightly, and suddenly an idea came to his mind. Refining. The flame instantly evaporated, and a large amount of spiritual energy was mixed into it. In just a moment, bursts of strange fragrance were emitted. Shimin Linglong glanced at Han Fei in surprise. You didn't light a fire like this before. Han Fei chuckled. I just thought of it. When the big mussel was cooked, Han Fei looked at Shan Tu and the others. Eat. Then, Han Fei waved his hand, cut a piece, and handed it to Shimin Linglong. Eat slowly. Don't eat too much. Shimin Linglong certainly knew that she couldn't eat too much. If she ate too much of the meat of this kind of creature, wouldn't she be stuffed to death? Shimin Linglong took a bite carefully. However, as soon as the meat entered her stomach, her body began to emit hot air. It took Shimin Linglong half an hour to eat a palm-sized piece of meat. At the same time, Han Fei had already eaten a pot of meat. Even Zhang Qiu and the others were shocked. Shan Tu looked at Han Fei as if he were drunk. Brother, can you still eat? Zhang Qiu asked. Brother, don't you feel stuffed? Han Fei tilted his head, felt it, and chuckled. I'm 80% full. Everyone. Many people had already begun to cultivate. For example, Shimin Linglong had already entered the state of cultivation and seemed to be about to make a breakthrough at any time. The power of the war god Horn had begun to fade. Shimin Linglong was actually still an intermediate hanging fisher. Gotcha. Shimin Linglong made a breakthrough, but her body was still full of energy. There was no shortage of spiritual energy on the battlefield where the battle had just taken place. As long as someone wanted to make a breakthrough, they could do so. When Shimin Linglong opened her eyes, she saw that Han Fei was in a strange posture again. His whole body was red, and 8 vortexes appeared on the surface of his body, and the redness on his face was fading rapidly. Of course, Shimin Linglong knew that Han Fei was practicing the desolate god body. Although she didn't know the name of this body tempering technique, she knew it. Shimin Linglong's heart did a flip. Yes, I'm very familiar with this body tempering technique now. He could make use of this opportunity to properly cultivate. About 2 hours later, many giants got up one after another. Having eaten and drunk enough, they felt energetic again. Many people were watching Han Fei and Shimin Linglong, talking in a low voice. Is this a human being? This human saved me just now. He's very strong. Human beings are just a bit too small. Their postures are so weird. When Shimin Linglong woke up again, she found that Han Fei was still eating, taking big bites. Shimin Linglong asked, Can you still eat? Han Fei grinned. I think I can make a breakthrough. Shimin Linglong was shocked. Is he talking about the breakthrough of the desolate god body? Over the years, Han Fei's desolate god body seemed to have made many breakthroughs. Besides, Shimin Linglong knew that in addition to this weird posture, Han Fei had another kind of body tempering technique. However, that one was more difficult and required a huge amount of energy. Han Fei tried it once and didn't try it again. After that attempt, Han Fei was weak for 3 days. Fearing that Han Fei didn't have enough to eat, the mountain giant found one of the heads of the 3-headed dragon python that he had killed and put it in front of Han Fei. Many giants exclaimed, Wow, can humans eat so much too? What do you know? He's making a breakthrough. Zhang Qiu glared at these people. Shut up. Don't disturb the honorable guest's breakthrough. When Han Fei was full again and began to cultivate the desolate god body, Shimin Linglong felt that the 8 vortexes were gradually converging into one vortex. The major acupoints are going to merge into one? Having cultivated the desolate god body, Shimin Linglong knew what Han Fei was doing. The merging of the major acupoints meant that this body tempering technique was about to be fully mastered. After another half an hour or so, the giant king tore the void and returned. Seeing this scene, he exclaimed in surprise, Interesting! What a high spiritual heritage! He swallowed the surrounding energy and merged all the major acupoints in his body. This technique is quite exquisite. However, it's still not enough. 100 years after the merging, there may be a whole new world. While saying so, the giant king grabbed a large amount of energy from the void and stuffed it directly into Han Fei's body. At that moment, Han Fei trembled all over. The 8 vortexes quickly converged, and in only 100 seconds, the major acupoints were merged into one, and his physique rose to a new height. However, Han Fei didn't wake up. He seemed to know that terrifying energy was falling. He turned over and sat cross-legged, letting the massive amount of energy hit him. His skin cracked, crazily devouring the energy and nurturing vitality at the same time. The giant king was surprised. Not bad, not bad, this kid actually has another body tempering technique. This technique is quite domineering. Ha ha ha, if you want to practice it, you have enough energy. What Han Fei cultivated was naturally the indestructible body. Before, he didn't have the resources to cultivate it. The first level was only half completed. Therefore, he put all his energy on the desolate god body, making the desolate god body progress rapidly. At this moment, now that he had the opportunity, Han Fei naturally wanted to cultivate the indestructible body. However, the onlookers of the war giants began to be moved as they watched. Even the giant king narrowed his eyes slightly. As for Shimin Linglong, she even covered her mouth, her eyes full of disbelief. This was the scene that she didn't want to see the most. Because at this moment, Han Fei's skin and flesh were melting and healing rapidly. The cycle repeated itself over and over again. The pain couldn't be understood by those who weren't directly involved. They just felt that it was cruel. An hour later, the giant king muttered, "This kid needs a lot of energy." 3 hours later, the giant king was speechless and looked at Shimin Linglong. "How long does he have to cultivate?" Shimin Linglong shook her head. "Senior, I don't know." After another 5 minutes or so, when the giant king saw the luster in Han Fei's flesh and blood, he couldn't help but say, "This kid is going to make a breakthrough again." The energy waves suddenly dissipated, and Han Fei suddenly opened his eyes. There was a trace of fire in his eyes, and a mouthful of foul air was spat out from his mouth. At that moment, Han Fei felt that he had become much stronger. Although he always felt that it was not enough, he was much stronger than before. The giant king said in a low voice, "Human boy, what kind of body tempering technique is this? It's extremely domineering. I'm surprised that you can bear it." Hearing someone shouting, Han Fei quickly raised his head. His neck was raised to the sky, and he saw the fierce face of the giant king. Han Fei slowly got up and scratched his head. "I don't know." Shimin Linglong added, "Senior, there are some problems with Wang Han's memory. Many things are due to his instinct. Senior, please find a way to help him awaken his memory." "Memory?" The giant king held the hammer. "I'm not very familiar with it. But we can try. Okay, the battles on all sides are over. In this battle, we won the 100,000 mountains, and the Sea clan won't dare to attack again in a short time. Let's go back to the clan first." Shan Tu hurriedly came to Han Fei and Shimin Linglong, patted his shoulder, and chuckled, indicating that the two of them should sit on his shoulder and go back. However, before Han Fei and Shimin Linglong moved, the sky suddenly darkened, and a palm fell from the sky. The giant king laughed. "Okay, let's go back to the clan." As for the large palm, with a slight movement of its fingers, it pushed Shan Tu away. Then, it spread its hands on the ground and looked at Han Fei. "Come on," Shimin Linglong blinked her eyes. This was an invitation from a strong master. She pulled Han Fei and said to Shan Tu, "Shan Tu, let's go back to the clan. I'll sit on your shoulder." Shan Tu chuckled. "Okay. See you in the clan." The mountain giant was too tall. As a result, their movements were relatively slow. However, no matter how slow they were, it was still relative. It was easy for them to crush people and creatures at the level of law enforcers. When Han Fei and Shimin Linglong stood on the shoulder of the mountain giant, their vision was extremely wide. There were even some clouds passing by them. The mountain giant said slowly, "Thank you for saving me." Han Fei grinned. Ha ha! Shimin Linglong looked at Han Fei. Idiot, can you stop practicing that body tempering technique? Han Fei said hesitantly, I want to practice it. Shimin Linglong stomped her feet and said, Others may not know, but I know. You tried it before and you almost lost half your life. This time, if it weren't for the Giant King, you wouldn't have been able to practice it. Besides, this is only the first level, right? Han Fei seemed to be stunned for a moment, and then a big fire suddenly burst out in his mind. Immediately after, lightning descended. It seemed that they were all for the sake of cultivating this body-refining technique. Han Fei was silent for a moment. Okay, I won't practice it for now. Bam! The mountain giant jumped slightly, grabbed the cliff with his big hand, and climbed up the cliff quickly. This time, the two of them saw that the forest was like a meadow, with clouds and mist in the distance. Indeed, for the mountain giant, these forests were just weeds. Chirp, flocks of birds flew past Han Fei and Shimin Linglong. Many birds even deliberately came over and glanced at Han Fei and Shimin Linglong. Each step of the mountain giant would take a long distance. As far as the eye could see, thousands of war giants were running wildly, rumbling. Shimin Linglong was a little absent-minded. She thought to herself, if the Giant King really recovers Han Fei's memory, is he still the same person? First update. Asking for votes, end of this chapter. Chapter 11:23. The Song of Victory had already been played in the 100,000 mountains. Han Fei and the others enjoyed the scenery along the way. When Han Fei and the others were about to reach the Beast King city, the mountain giant suddenly stopped in an empty valley. There were already several mountain giants standing here. Some of the mountain giants suddenly sat down, some laid down, and some leaned against the mountains. When the mountain giants didn't move, a huge number of spiritual plants immediately began to climb on them. In just a moment, these mountain giants seemed to have become a part of this mountain range. The King of Giants suddenly appeared beside Han Fei and the others, humming, "The larger the body, the more energy it needs." In addition to eating, spiritual plants can also absorb energy from the earth and transmit it to the mountain giant. So, this is their means to maintain their survival. If the earth collapses, the mountain giants can only survive in the sea. But at that time, the Sea Clan will not allow them to live. Han Fei didn't feel anything. He didn't care about these things now. Shimin Linglong, however, felt very curious. Sure enough, in the boundless universe, different creatures had different ways of survival. The King of Giants glanced at Han Fei. "I'll take you to the King City." Han Fei looked at the mountain giant. "Goodbye." Shimin Linglong whispered into the mountain giant's ear, "Thank you for taking us back." The mountain giant seemed to want to laugh. However, just as he grinned, the sound waves surged, and then he shut his mouth. "Goodbye." Before Han Fei and Shimin Linglong realized what was going on, they felt their vision blurred. In an instant, the two appeared on the altar of the war giants from the shoulder of the mountain giant. At this moment, some war giants had returned and were running wildly, telling everyone that they had won. A big giant was bragging while carrying a small giant. "Your father, I killed at least 100 big lobsters this time and brought back meat." The small giant was kicking the chest of the big giant, making thumping sounds. Someone yelled, "This time I almost died in the sea. Thanks to that human priest, what's his name again? King Wang Han." A child reminded him. The giant hummed, "Yes, it's him. What a strange name. This human shaman is really powerful. Not only did he save me, but he also saved a mountain giant." "Wow. How did you save him? How did you save him?" A child followed behind that person and asked. The man laughed heartily. That scene was really explosive. By the way, the mountain giant is fighting the three-headed dragon python. The entire territory of the war giants was in chaos. Some people were bragging about their military exploits, some were telling stories, some were describing their bravery, some were eating meat, and there was even the sound of children playing. When the Giant King suddenly appeared on the altar, someone exclaimed, The king is back. King, I heard you killed a great sea monster. King, I heard that you broke through the entire sea by yourself. King, I want to sleep with you tonight. Han Fei could clearly feel the giant king's cheeks twitch, and he couldn't help but scratch his head. Isn't it normal to sleep together? Why was the giant king trembling? Roar! The giant king roared, the 100,000 mountains has won this battle. Boys, let us rejoice. Bring out all the delicious food and drinks. Leaders, organize people and go to the sea to fish for food. Everyone worked hard to beat them to death. It would be a pity not to eat them. Roar! Our king is mighty. Our king is invincible. King, will you stay tonight? The giant king quickly said, Okay, shaman, come here for a moment. Today, I have something to say to the human kids. Eat by yourselves and go crazy. After saying that, the giant king seemed to be escaping. With a wave of his hand, he brought Han Fei and Shimen Linglan to the huge royal city. The capital of the giants was built along the cliff and the scale was quite large. Among them, there was a large platform square that protruded out of the mountain. Standing at the end of the square, they could see the altar. Shimen Linglan thought, with the strength of the giant king, as long as he stood at the end of this platform, he could speak to the whole tribe. Thousands of people knelt down and worshipped him. At this moment, the giant king said, Human kids, we war giants are simple and don't have so many complicated customs like you humans. Let me ask you first, are you here on behalf of the humans? Shimen Linglan quickly responded, No, senior. We don't represent anyone. It's just that Wang Han wanted to come, so we came. The giant king laughed. That's good. There's nothing to say about the 100,000 mountains and the humans. Wang Han did seem a little silly. Come with me, I'll show you. The giant king didn't put on airs. Perhaps the giants had always been like this. At least, he was different from the strong masters that Han Fei and Shimen Linglan had seen. The giant king's palace, well, it didn't look like a palace. There weren't so many fancy things here, but there were a lot of broken bodies of creatures, which seemed to be left to eat. There were some decorations, but they were all made of various big bones. In the center of the circular palace, there was a large round mat. On the surrounding stone walls, there were many murals engraved. On the murals, the giant king led his tribe and won one war after another. The giant king sat down on his big mat and said to Han Fei and Shimen Linglan, Come and sit down. Shimen Linglan quickly pulled Han Fei and ran to the mat. She was very nervous. While she was filled with anticipation, she was also filled with worry. The giant king stretched out his hand and a big stone ball the size of a hill appeared. The giant king said, Wang Han, inject spiritual energy into it and see. The giant king was puzzled. Han Fei's body was absorbing spiritual energy and energy all the time. Not to mention the fast speed, it was really rare to see someone with such a young foundation and such high strength. Shimen Linglan was surprised. This is the spiritual heritage testing stone? It was the first time that Shimen Linglan had seen a spiritual heritage testing stone that was larger than a person. It must be because the giants were tall. She couldn't help but look at Han Fei. After so many years, she didn't know what level Han Fei's spiritual heritage was. Han Fei stupidly put his hand on the spiritual heritage testing stone and pressed it casually. On the spiritual heritage testing stone, a rich purple light burst out, and Shimen Linglan's eyes widened. Is this an advanced spiritual heritage? And it's so rich that it seems to be higher than my spiritual heritage. The giant king's eyes narrowed slightly and he said, Sure enough, a level 9 spiritual heritage. No wonder your cultivation speed is so fast. Level 9? Shimen Linglan looked at Han Fei incredulously. How could it be so high? This kind of ultra-quality spiritual heritage is hard to find even in 1,000 years. Fortunately, Han Fei was not sober at the moment. Otherwise, he would have been surprised. Where the F***ck did I get a level 9 spiritual heritage? The giant king didn't care much about the spiritual heritage but said, Wang Han, let go of your soul first and let me see what's going on with your memory. Shimin Linglan quickly said, Idiot, did you hear that? I'm helping you. Relax your guard. Han Fei scratched his head and nodded heavily. When Han Fei raised his head again, he suddenly found that he couldn't move, including Shimin Linglan. Shimin Linglan was the same. She couldn't move her body and could only watch quietly. A finger phantom pointed at Han Fei's forehead. Originally, the giant king didn't take it too seriously. After all, Han Fei was just a hidden fisher. Memory disorder was caused by the disorder of the soul. After sorting out the soul, everything returned to normal. However, when the giant king tried to straighten out Han Fei's soul, in an instant, countless images came to his face, followed by a green light. Bam! In the blink of an eye, a wisp of the giant king's divine soul was directly crushed. Han Fei, on the other hand, vomited a mouthful of blood. The barrier disappeared, and the giant king's body trembled, and he groaned unconsciously. Soul treasure, river of time? The giant king's face suddenly became extremely serious. He stood up with a swish and looked at Han Fei with a complicated expression. Shimin Linglan hurriedly threw herself in front of Han Fei. Idiot, are you asleep? Wang Han, how are you? Senior, what's wrong with him? The giant king looked complicated and said leisurely, It's okay. I'll be fine soon. Hearing that Han Fei was fine, Shimin Linglan breathed a sigh of relief. Is this the consequence of the treatment? He just vomited a mouthful of blood and he'll be fine? After about 10 minutes, Han Fei slowly opened his eyes. It seemed that he didn't vomit that mouthful of blood just now. He even scratched his head with a dumbfounded look. The giant king took a breath and said in an unprecedentedly serious tone, Little girl, do you know where Wang Han came from? Shimin Linglan froze for a moment. Obviously, Han Fei's memory was not good. But what was the giant king's expression? Shimin Linglan hurriedly said, Senior, Wang Han was born in a human village since he was a child. He lost his mother when he was a child, and he was silly since he was a child. He was extremely talented, but no one discovered it. Later, because his father died on the battlefield, he came to the remote wilderness jungle with me to cultivate. Oh, by the way, he can only cultivate a very ordinary technique called true spirit fishing art. The giant king pondered. Are you sure he lived in a small human village since he was a child? Shimin Linglan nodded. I'm sure. He knew Han Fei very well. Besides, many people in the grand desolate village knew this. How could it be false? The giant king paced back and forth in the palace, seeming to have complicated thoughts. After a long time, he said lightly, Do you think an ordinary person can give birth to a genius with a level 9 spiritual heritage? At this moment, outside the palace, the voice of the giant priestess sounded. King, I'm here. Come in. As soon as the giant priestess came in, the giant king couldn't wait to ask, There is only one word, human, on the oracle? The giant priestess nodded. Yes, it's true. There is only one word. All the clansmen who stayed behind saw it. The giant king frowned and said to himself, The god of war is not dead? Where is he? Human. Who do you think it refers to? The giant priestess pointed at Han Fei. Everything is too coincidental. I think it is written about human, not human. This is a very important difference. The giant king pondered for a moment. Okay, I see. You can go back now. After that, the giant king's figure flashed and disappeared. Then, outside the palace, the giant king's voice sounded in the air. Beast King, Heavenly Qing, Fairy, we have something to discuss. Come quickly. There were 4 top masters in the 100,000 mountains. They were the Beast King who was in charge of the wild beasts, the Heavenly Qing of the Sky Clan, the Water Fairy of the Monster Plant Clan, and the Giant King of the War Giants. Among them, the strength of the 4 was relatively balanced. However, the Beast King was the strongest and the only one among the four who was at the peak of the venerable state. He was the supermaster most likely to break through and become a king. As the giant king roared, the first to arrive was a spring. In the water, white flowers bloomed, and a young woman in white with a serene expression appeared. The woman glanced into the palace and then said lightly, "Big guy, did the oracle really appear?" Before the giant king answered, a figure of light emerged from the void. After landing, he turned into a cold man in black feathered clothes. The man said, "I already know about this. 2 humans crossing from the remote wilderness jungle. How brave." Oh. In the sky, a figure was jumping. After jumping several times, it finally smashed on the platform outside. Taking a closer look, it was a big ape with a ferocious face. He held a thick stick in his hand and was carrying it on his shoulder. The big ape strode forward and shook his body. "What's wrong? What's so important that the 4 of us have to gather here?" Shimin Linglan pulled Han Fei up from the cushion. Shimin Linglan's body tensed up. 4 venerable level masters. They were as powerful as the entire U City. Plus the mountain giants and the masters of the other races, it was safe to say that if the 100,000 mountains went to war with the humans might not necessarily win. The giant king stretched out his hand and blocked Han Fei and Shimin Linglan's hearing. Then he said leisurely, "That human kid has a level 9 spiritual heritage. He's almost a king's heritage. Also, there seems to be something wrong with him. You need to take a closer look. I'm not sure." Then, a wisp of soul energy flowed out of the giant king's fingertip for the other 3 to observe. The water deity was surprised. "Level 9 spiritual heritage?" The big ape sneered. "So what? He's just a king. How can he hiss the river of time?" The big ape's face suddenly changed. Even the heavenly crystal and the water deity were shocked. The big ape took a step forward and stood in front of Han Fei. Shimin Linglan was startled. She hurriedly pulled Han Fei back. However, the big ape didn't deliberately restrain its pressure. Therefore, Shimin Linglan felt that she was suffocating and could fall to the ground at any time. However, Han Fei was completely fine. He just looked up at the big ape quietly and even blinked a few times. Suddenly, the figure of a big ape appeared in his mind. "Be nice to the beast." Han Fei was a little confused. He narrowed his eyes and felt a slight headache. The big ape stared at Han Fei and said, "Human boy, let me have a look." Then, a wisp of its soul touched Han Fei's eyebrows. Bam! Han Fei spat out another mouthful of blood and sat on the ground. The wisp of the big ape's soul collapsed. Shimin Linglan immediately gritted her teeth. Senior Beast King, Senior Giant King has already checked. It took courage to speak to a venerable. Shimin Linglan felt that if everyone came to check, Han Fei would spit out 2 mouthfuls of blood again. The big ape suddenly turned around and looked at the 3 people walking over. He said in surprise, "This kid has such a powerful soul treasure. It can actually crush my divine soul." The giant king blocked Han Fei and Shimin Linglan's perception. "How is it, monkey? What did you see?" The big ape's eyes were cold. "You're right. This kid is indeed involved in the river of time. Not only that, he is quite a genius. He seems to be related to the beast." The water deity appeared next to Han Fei and looked at Shimin Linglan. "Don't panic. A few mouthfuls of blood won't hurt him. We have to check it out one by one." Puff! Puff! After a while, the water deity and the heavenly crystal's expressions became complicated. The giant king was right. This kid must be extraordinary. Then, the big ape asked the same question as the giant king. He looked at Shimin Linglan and asked, "Girl, do you know where this kid is from?" Shimin Linglan's face was a bit pale, but she still said firmly, "Outside the city of Yu, in the great barren village. His parents are ordinary cultivators." "Nonsense. Who can give birth to such a little monster?" Shimin Linglan gritted her teeth. Why was it so strange? Could it be that Wang Han wasn't born in the great barren village? The water deity waved his hand. Han Fei and the others were wrapped in a water ball and isolated. After that, water deity said, I can also sense his entanglement with the spiritual plant lineage from this child. Interesting. I'm sure he's not from this era. The heavenly crystal nodded slightly. Yes, he has nothing to do with the sky rays. However, from the fragmented memories, this kid is a peerless heavenly talent. He's enemies with the sea rays. That's right. The big ape said angrily. Is that what we should be concerned about now? I can vaguely see the endless sea in the future. Humans actually live in the sky? What does that mean? The four of them were all silent. The meaning was terrifying. It meant that the earth would eventually be submerged by the sea and the 100,000 mountains would be gone. The heavenly crystal looked back at Han Fei and then said coldly, Can his soul-type treasure be broken? The water deity shook his head. No. His current condition was already very bad. Traveling through the river of time may have caused unpredictable effects on him. It's all thanks to that soul-type treasure. Otherwise, he wouldn't be as simple as a fool now. Now, let's not even talk about whether we can break that soul-type treasure. If it's really broken, it's very likely that it will directly destroy his soul. The giant king said, Deity, your demonic plant clan has the most soul-nourishing techniques. Can't you cure him? The water deity pondered for a moment. I can only try. If we want to restore all his memories, we have to set things right. The best way is to let him slowly remember and let his soul return to one. That's the best way. The heavenly crystal said indifferently, The question is, how did he come here? What's his purpose? The other three felt a chill in their hearts. The giant king looked at the beast king. Can you send people across the river of time? Puff. The great ape was dumbfounded and looked at the giant king as if he were an idiot. What the hell are you talking about? If I had the ability to send people across the river of time, I would have sent someone back to the age of immortals to ask for help. How could I do this? Fight against the sea clan like a fool? The water deity asked, Beast King, what kind of ability do you think can send people across the river of time? The Beast King shook his head. I don't know. Logically speaking, it's impossible even for a king-level powerhouse. However, if it's a king-level powerhouse who controls time, it's hard to say. But in any case, the River of Time is an extremely mysterious forbidden area that ordinary people dare not touch at all. If you're not careful, you'll get lost in time. Even a king-level powerhouse can easily die. The giant king pointed at Han Fei. Then how did he come here? The four of them were silent for a while. They were venerables, not kings nor gods. They could only see the shadow of the River of Time in Han Fei from the vague memory fragments in Han Fei's mind. The water deity said, Let's not talk about how he came here. In short, he must have a purpose. He just forgot it. We can keep these two people and see if we can restore his memory. Otherwise, it's useless to think so much. Also, if the 100,000 mountains are gone, does it mean that the land here, and even the Black Rock City on the other island, will be submerged? The giant king said leisurely, Definitely. If this kid's memory is correct, we should be dead. No. The water deity's eyes flickered. But at least it proves that the human race is still surviving. Besides, the war has not stopped. That is to say, we still have a way out. The Beast King roared, What way out? We don't know. The Heavenly Qing said, The way out must be in our current era. Of course, we found a way to survive. Otherwise, how can there be future generations? The water deity nodded. Yes. Don't forget, the oracle of the god of war appeared. Does the appearance of the oracle indicate that the god of war is not dead? And this person may become the key to the continuation of our respective races? The giant king shook his head. No, there is a problem. The god of war is very long-winded and has never spoken a word of the oracle. The only thing I can think of is that even if the god of war is not dead, His state is extremely bad, and he may even be on the verge of death. Otherwise, he can use the oracle to talk to me. Do you believe it? Everyone. The Beast King was speechless. Then what do you mean? Is this person useful or not? The Giant King roared, Of course, he is useful. At least, he gave me a glimpse of the future generations. This alone is enough for us to make a lot of preparations. The water deity also nodded and said, Yes, just his appearance has already explained too many things. Also, I don't know if you have noticed, whether it is the war giants or the beast clan, in his memory fragments there are very few. Roar. The great ape raised his stick on the ground. It's over. It shows that the fate of our race is not good. The heavenly Qing coldly said, Instead of arguing here, why don't we ask why this kid is here? The Beast King angrily said, His brain is in a mess, how can he think of this? The Sky Qing said, What if? Second update, asking for votes, end of this chapter. Chapter 11:24. Han Fei was like a fish eater who saw 4 super experts of different sizes chattering endlessly. Shimin Linglan was on tenterhooks. She looked at Han Fei and then at the 4 venerables. She was very nervous. Did Han Fei really have such a big secret? Did he need 4 venerables to discuss it for so long? All of a sudden, the water ripples were removed. Shimin Linglan's heart tightened. She pulled Han Fei back. The 4 venerables looked at Han Fei. This was because the water immortal was most like a human. She had the appearance of a gentle and graceful woman, so she was the most approachable. Water Fairy smiled and looked at Han Fei. Wang Han, you said you don't know why you came to the 100,000 mountains. Do you have any questions? Wang Han scratched his head and shook his head. Water Fairy's expression didn't change. Or, is there anything you want to know the most? Shimin Linglan said. He wants to know the most about his memory. However, Water Fairy didn't listen to Shimin Linglan. He looked at Han Fei and scratched his head from time to time. In the end, Han Fei murmured, Why did he fight with the sea race? This was Han Fei's real thought. In that instant, he said it out loud. Water Fairy turned around and looked at the other 3. Tianqing said in a deep voice, He really remembers? He came back to find the answer, right? The King of Giants said angrily, Does the person who sent him here not know this? The King of Beasts roared, I'm not sure. Did he send him here? We don't know. The King of Giants sneered. Otherwise, why would he come here himself? Water Fairy said indifferently, as expected. He spent so much effort to come here. He must have a purpose. They looked at each other and nodded. Water Fairy said, Shimin Linglan, we have something to say to him alone. Then, without caring whether Shimin Linglan was willing or not, the water barrier isolated Shimin Linglan. Han Fei frowned. He looked at Shimin Linglan and tried to remove the water barrier. However, he found that he couldn't move the barrier at all. He glared at Water Fairy angrily. However, the water deity was not angry but looked at Han Fei quietly. You know, you are different from her. It was better not to let her know about some things. Otherwise, she will be very sad. Maybe it was the water immortal's words that touched Han Fei, but he slowly calmed down. Water Fairy said, Wang Han, we don't care if your name is Wang Han or not. However, there are some words that we are telling you now that will be imprinted in your mind. In the future, whether or not you can remember will depend on your growth. Perhaps, as your strength increases, your soul will gradually recover. Perhaps, under some kind of stimulation, it could also recover. In short, the temporary disorder of the divine soul is not a big problem. The King Giant said, Wang Han, listen carefully to the answer you want to know. The water deity said lightly, The era that you're in now is called the Age of Chaos. It was not that all techniques had withered, but that the Great Tao had withered. Why did the Great Tao wither? That was because 30,000 years ago that era was called the Age of the Gods. What is God? He controls the Great Tao and looks down on all living beings. he can establish the foundation of an entire clan with his own strength. Han Fei listened attentively. But he didn't understand. Why did this person want to tell him this? But it was enough for him to remember it. Water Fairy slowly said, "We don't know the specific reason. But in the Age of Chaos, the gods fought on the other side of the sea because of one matter." Where was that? Where was that? We didn't know. That battle swept through the world for 3 years. The heavens cried unceasingly, and the great Tao collapsed. And every time the great Tao collapsed, it symbolized the fall of a god. Remember, almost all the gods participated in the battle. From then on, all clans had no Tao, and all Taos returned to nothingness. You must remember that becoming a king does not mean obtaining the great Tao. Becoming a king is only the first step, but even this step is already extremely difficult. The Beast King said, "Boy, you must remember this. According to your memory, becoming a king in your era was even more difficult than in the Age of Chaos. The question you asked involves a lot of things. You can't touch it unless you become a king." Han Fei scratched his head and thought, "I don't understand." Water Fairy smiled slightly. "Did you hear that? You can't touch it unless you become a king. Even if you become a king, you can't touch it easily. The reason why the sea race and the myriad clans went to war is that after the gods fell, a holy spirit drew up a decree from the sea god. We don't know the content of the decree. But the general meaning is that the sea race must slaughter the myriad clans, reopen the chaos, and let the great Tao reappear. At that time, a large number of new gods who inherited the great Tao will appear and become the only rulers of this world." The giant king said, "F***CK, if it weren't for the large number of sea race creatures, the myriad clans would have already destroyed them." Water Fairy didn't care whether Han Fei understood or not. She didn't care as long as Han Fei could remember what she said today. She continued, "We've already told you the answer you wanted to know. As for whether you can remember it or not, when will you remember it? It depends on yourself. In short, once the sea race really suppresses the myriad clans, the other clans will never be able to rise again and will probably be slaughtered. With our strength, we can only know this much. As for whether there is a bigger secret behind it, why did the gods fight? These are not things we can know." Suddenly, the Sky King added, "By the way, there is one more thing. In the Battle of the Gods, many forbidden areas have been created. If you encounter them, don't go in at will. They are usually very dangerous." The Beast King looked at the Sky King. "Are you talking about that place?" The Sky King nodded. "Human boy, the forbidden areas of the Battle of the Gods are often accompanied by eternal darkness. In this part of the world that we know of, there is an extremely mysterious and unknown region. We don't know where it will appear, but if you meet it in the future, don't go in." The giant king hummed, "Wang Han, you have to remember this. Although I don't know if you have a chance to cross the river of time and return to the future after you recover your memory. However, if you die here, then you'll really die. The answer you get now will be meaningless." Han Fei didn't know why, but he felt that he must remember today's words. It seemed that it was very important, although he didn't understand a word. The Beast King suddenly said, "This kid is also an alien, isn't he? If he was not a peerless talent, he wouldn't have been sent here." The Giant King nodded seriously. "Of course, a hidden fisher can save the mountain giant. Do you think he can do it?" The Beast King suddenly said, "Old Goo, what do you think we'll do if we all die?" The Giant King scratched his head. "We can't surrender willingly." The Beast King suddenly slammed his stick on the ground. "You giants are just not smart enough. I mean, since this kid is a peerless talent and seems to be a little involved with us, why don't we?" The Water Immortal suddenly smiled. "I think the same as the Beast King." The Sky King narrowed his eyes and said, "You mean, let him be more involved with our clans? Or even, impose karma?" The Beast King suddenly patted his chest. "That's right. If this kid doesn't die and has a chance to go back, we won't be able to contact him in the future. Why don't we let him be involved with our clans? He can't avoid it even if he wants to. In the future, if something happens to our clans, can this kid just sit back and do nothing? Who? The Giant King slapped his thigh. That's right. It's not easy for such a character to come here. We can't just watch him run away. The Water Immortal smiled and said, That makes sense. The Sky King nodded slightly. I have no objection. Anyway, he's from the future. In any case, we won't be involved. The Beast King stamped his stick and looked at the Giant King. This kid's physique doesn't seem to be weak. Which one of us will do it first? The Giant King muttered, Not weak? Aren't you good at fighting? I think you should teach him how to fight. The Great Ape sneered. Don't we know each other? When you reach the pinnacle of body refining, you can fight however you want. Forget it, teach them all. Let's see how much this kid can learn. The Giant King said, I'll go first. This time, no one had any objection. In terms of comprehensive teaching, the Giant King definitely had the advantage, and the Water Immortal had no advantage. After all, Han Fei was not a manipulator. Although she could teach him by force, the path had already been set. What else could she teach him? While Han Fei was still dumbfounded, the few of them decided Han Fei's path in a few words. The Giant King said, Let's teach him 1 year first and see how he goes. I think his soul is so messed up that he won't be able to recover in a few years. The Beast King nodded. It's a little short, but it doesn't matter. In short, it's all about him. How much he learns depends on himself. The Sky King nodded. I have no objection. The Water Immortal glanced at Shimin Linglan and thought to herself, I can't teach him much. However, teaching Shimin Linglan seems to have something to do with Han Fei. So she made a decision in her heart. Clatter. Shimin Linglan was unsealed, and the Giant King said leisurely, Wang Han, the 4 of us have decided to accept you as our disciple. Hurry up and become our disciple. Shimin Linglan was shocked. What's going on? The 4 venerables all want to accept him as a disciple? This idiot, is his talent so terrifying? Han Fei was stunned and said a little hesitantly, Teach him combat skills? Shimin Linglan was speechless and tugged at Han Fei's sleeve. Of course. Han Fei grinned when he heard that he was going to teach combat skills. Okay. The Giant King and the others. The Beast King scratched his butt. Didn't they say that humans have to bow to their masters? That's it? The Sky King said coldly. His brain is not normal. What can he remember? Shimin Linglan was embarrassed and pulled Han Fei to kneel. However, she couldn't pull him this time. Han Fei didn't want to kneel. The Giant King hummed. Even if his soul is messed up, he still has the pride of a heavenly talent. Shimin Linglan looked embarrassed. Forget it, let him be. Anyway, the venerables didn't seem to be angry. The Water Immortal looked at them. I've already taught them. I don't mind teaching one more. You also taught this girl, didn't you? If I'm not mistaken, this girl also has a very high spiritual heritage. However, she was forcibly replaced by someone else. Otherwise, she would at least be a heavenly talent. Shimin Linglan's body trembled. What do you mean? Did I benefit from it? Was she taught by someone else? However, the others were silent for a while after hearing the Water Immortal's proposal. The Giant King said, That's right. However, she is too weak now. She has no foundation. Even if I teach her, I'm afraid she won't be able to keep up. Shimin Linglan was slightly disappointed. Sure enough, I've been seen through? Her foundation is too weak. Perhaps in this lifetime, I will never be able to surpass that idiot Wang Han? However, the Water Immortal smiled and said, If your foundation is not strong enough, you can make up for it with spiritual fruits. The demonic plant clan never lacks spiritual fruit. Let this girl go with me. 1 year later, I will send her back a different person. Before the others could speak, Han Fei grabbed Shimin Linglan's wrist, as if he didn't trust the Water Immortal. Shimin Linglan tilted her head and looked at Han Fei. It was not that he didn't want her to grow, but he was afraid that she would die. Then, in this world, he would be the only one left. The giant king hummed. Wang Han, this is the girl's opportunity. She can only keep up with your pace if she becomes stronger. Otherwise, are you willing to see you become strong while she is still weak? The water immortal said, even if you are willing, is she willing? Han Fei scratched his head and looked at Shimin Linglan. Do you want to go? Shimin Linglan's eyes were firm. This is an opportunity. Whether for revenge or to catch up with Han Fei, she had to go. Just as the giant king said, the four venerables all wanted to accept Han Fei as a disciple, so Han Fei would definitely usher in explosive growth. If she didn't work hard, she wouldn't be able to keep up with Han Fei. By then, she might not even be able to catch up with him. Han Fei nodded. Okay. The giant king and the others naturally knew why the water immortal did this. So, they just took advantage of the situation. However, the giant king said, Fairy, don't send her back in a year. Send her back in half a year and I can teach her then. Otherwise, you want me to spend another year? The water immortal nodded. Okay. The sky crystal said lightly, come to me in the 3rd year. I'm leaving first. Swish. The sky crystal disappeared in place. Since it was decided, there was no need to stay. The beast king stamped his rod. Next year, send her to me. I'm leaving. The water immortal reached out to Shimin Linglan and said, come, follow me. After Shimin Linglan disappeared, Han Fei frowned and looked at the void. The giant king laughed and said, all right, stop looking. She will come back in half a year. Come with me. With a swish, Han Fei appeared on the altar of the war giants. At this moment, many giants were burning bonfires and stuffing themselves with food. Seeing the giant king appear, they didn't intend to get up. Someone held up a big squid and shouted at the giant king, King, eat. The giant king's voice rippled out. Today, I announce that I want to accept Wang Han as a disciple. Huh! Many giants were stunned. The king wants to accept a disciple? However, this surprise only lasted for a short time. Then, Han Fei heard a roar. After all, Han Fei had saved many people on the battlefield. At least, these people had no objection. Since a group of people had no objection, the rest of the war giants basically had no objection. For them, the so-called disciple didn't matter. In fact, it didn't matter. Because the giant king often came out to teach them, they were all used to it. Where is thick earth? King, I'm here. A giant carrying a giant hammer, more than 20 meters tall, jumped from a distance and smashed on the ground with a bang. The giant king grunted and said, from now on, according to Wang Han's refining speed, arrange refining for him. The amount of refining every day must reach his limit. Thick earth froze for a moment and looked at the sledgehammer in his hand. King, is it suitable? The giant king sneered. Do you think he is weak? With that, the giant king waved one hand, and a huge and heavy refining table flew over. The giant king looked at Han Fei. Wang Han, today, I will teach you the 100 War Divine Hammer. This hammer has 81 hammer technique. Under infinite combinations, there will be infinite hammer technique. At the same time, this is also a war hammer technique. In a battle, you should press forward and go all out. According to the profound meaning of the god of war, the brave will not retreat, and the strength must not be lost. Do you hear me? Han Fei nodded quickly. Got it. Oh. The king is going to refine. Stay away. Come on, move the food away. King, can you go to the sky to refine? The giant king was speechless. A bunch of brats, you think I'm useless? Everyone wants me to teach you. The giant king snorted and looked at Han Fei. Come up. Then the giant king stepped into the air and stood hundreds of meters in the air. Whoop! Han Fei spread his wings and also stood in the air. The giant king glanced at Han Fei's phantom glass and couldn't help but be surprised. These wings are not bad. However, they are not very useful. When you become an explorer, they will not be of much use. Hey! The giant king's face twisted. Bones. From all directions, thousands of big bones flew over, all of which were sea demon bones. There were also some strange stones of extremely good quality flying over. The giant king glanced at Han Fei. Stay 100 meters away from me. Watch carefully. Don't blow me away. Swish. Han Fei obediently flashed 100 meters away. The giant king was not surprised by this flashing ability, because it was nothing worth praising. On the ground and in the sky, many giants watched from afar. Although they didn't like the giant king refining on the ground, they still had to watch. Ow ow ow. Clang. The giant king held the war hammer in his hand and, like a collapsing mountain, several phantoms appeared in several directions. The hammer broke through the air and struck out with flames. Clang, clang, clang. The giant king shouted, "The first 36 strikes must not shake, the hand must not shake, and the force must not rebound. The 36 strikes must remove the dross and refine the essence in one go." Ripples of the void shook. Han Fei felt that every time his hammer fell, his eyes were pierced. However, under the perception of his soul, he could still see it quite clearly. However, the sound was so loud that it almost pierced through his eardrums. "My king is mighty." Quite a few giants were roaring loudly. However, Han Fei was memorizing the hammering method. The 36 strikes were as steady as a mountain, and the process of removing the impurities was over. Originally, the countless big bones and strange stones were directly turned into pancakes, and the volume was reduced by more than half. The giant king shouted again, "The hammering method can not only enhance the toughness of the weapon, but also use this elasticity to attack and retreat." Look, clang, clang, clang. For a moment, hundreds of hammer shadows bombarded from all directions, and the outline of a giant axe was being smashed out. Under a series of crazy bombardment, the giant king did not retreat but hammered the refining platform forward hundreds of meters. Clang. The last blow. The axe was formed and spiritual energy rolled over. The giant king roared, "If one round doesn't work, then another round. But don't use the first 36 strikes." In the void, the ripples shook in the void like overlapping waves, emitting dazzling halos, which made Han Fei's heart skip a beat. When the big axe was forged, the giant king held the war hammer and asked, "How much do you remember?" Han Fei scratched his head. "I think I remember." The giant king was about to say, "Do you want me to do it again? How can you remember it?" Hearing this, the giant king was unhappy. You hammer 2 war hammers for yourself first." Han Fei scratched his head, and the giant king shouted, "Thick Earth, give him your hammers. He can't use my war hammer." Thick Earth shouted, "Wang Han, take the hammers." Looking at the 2 big hammers that broke through the air like meteors, Han Fei stretched out his hands and held the hammers. The huge force tried to throw him away, but as he flapped the phantom glass wings, he easily stabilized his body. Many giants jeered, "Oh, he caught it. Thick Earth, you are a disgrace." Someone laughed. "Thick Earth, it seems that your strength is still not enough." Thick Earth blushed. "I didn't use any strength. Isn't it normal that I was caught?" The giant king grabbed some materials and said casually, "Hammer harder. Our 100,000 mountains is not short of materials. We can make more." The 3rd chapter. 3 2-in-1 chapters, which is equivalent to 6 chapters. Okay. Let's continue like this tomorrow. I won't live stream tonight. Damn it. I've already become a robot. Please vote. End of this chapter. Chapter 11:25. The giant king's forging displayed unparalleled power. And Han Fei, although he caught the warhammer, his hands were too small. At this time, he couldn't even hold it, let alone forge. A golden giant suddenly condensed on Han Fei's body and grabbed the warhammer with both hands. The giant king's eyes narrowed slightly. Condensed will, a bit. Hiss, invincible will? The Giant King's eyes almost popped out. F***ck. Did I just pick up a disciple who walks on the invincible road? Although the Giant King knew that Han Fei could be sent through the river of time, his talent was definitely not bad. However, he was on the invincible road, which made him a little panicked. In this world, there were many people who could walk the invincible road. However, there were very few people who could walk this road. This made the Giant King a little puzzled. The person behind him must have invested a lot to send such a heavenly talent here. Han Fei carried the sledgehammer in the air, took a deep breath, and instantly activated the devil change. Clang 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 clang. Similarly, there were ripples in the void. However, compared with the ripples of the Giant King, they were basically negligible. However, the surging momentum still attracted the attention of many giants. A child shouted, "Wow! Wang Han is so powerful. I can't even hit him." A giant patted the little child's head. "Kid, what do you know? This is called power. No matter who it is, as long as their realm is high enough and they are strong enough, you can't beat them." Because it was the first time he used the 100 Wars Divine Hammer, although Han Fei was extremely proficient in refining, he had lost his memory, so it was the first time he used it. The Giant King shouted, "Forget the form. Don't knock exactly the same as me. Hammering is ever-changing. You can do it however you like." Clang, clang, clang every time Han Fei tried his best. However, after 36 strikes, he felt a little tired in his arms. After 36 strikes, under the huge elasticity, Han Fei almost couldn't hold the hammer several times. In Han Fei's eyes, the sledgehammer he refined seemed to have become an enemy. No matter what, he couldn't retreat. Clang a moment later, after a round of hammering, Han Fei found that there was a crack on his upper arm. However, at this moment, the surrounding war giants all swallowed their saliva. This was Wang Han's first time using the 100 Wars Godly Hammer, and he actually managed to hit around? It should be known that even within the war giant tribe, there were no more than 100 people who could complete the entire 100 War Godly Hammer in one round in 100 years. As for those who could get 2 rounds in their first attempt, there were only 3 of them. Not a single one of them was able to complete 3 rounds in one go. That thick earth was the guy who could hit 2 rounds of the 100 War God Hammer on his first try. Therefore, Ho-Tu's status was very high. Sure enough, the Giant King shouted, "That's not enough. How can this hammer be used to forge weapons? Not to mention using it in battle. Give me another round." As the Giant King roared, Han Fei didn't say a word and knocked again. After half an hour, Han Fei's arms were covered with cracks, and he succeeded in the second round. Hiss! Success! Wang Han has reached the second round. This human is so strong. Will there be a third round? The Giant King's eyes flickered. Don't heal yourself. Continue to fight. It's still not enough. Clang, clang, clang. After the third round, Han Fei felt extreme pain in his arms. His muscles were torn and blood was flowing out. The Giant King shouted, "Not enough. Another round." Clang, clang, clang again. Clang, clang, clang again. Under the gaze of thousands of war giants, under the roar of the Giant King, Han Fei kept hitting 9 rounds of the 100 War Godly Hammer. His arms were dripping with blood, and the bones of his fingers were exposed. The Giant King was speechless. F***ck, is he still a human? This is the real war giant, isn't it? Thinking of his first time, he seemed to have hit the 5th round and then passed out. But this guy hit 9 rounds in one go. Does he still want to continue? Clang Kacha. This time, Han Fei's hand was broken and he lost all his strength. He almost lost his balance and fell dozens of meters from the air, wobbling. The Giant King knew that this was Han Fei's limit. If he continued to fight, his foundation would be damaged. However, he never expected that Han Fei's toughness was so high. The Giant King said, "Heal yourself." Hearing this, Han Fei hurriedly cast a divine healing technique on himself. It hurt too much. Although he still had strength, his body couldn't bear it anymore. Thick Earth flew over, caught his twin hammers, and then reached out to take the twin hammers forged by Han Fei, saying, "Training starts tomorrow. On the first day, let's accumulate 100 rounds to see the effect." Not to mention the children, even the adult war giants were dumbfounded. Fighting 100 rounds a day? Was that a death sentence? However, the Giant King didn't refute. "Okay. Let's practice first." Han Fei ate and slept with the war giant. When he woke up the next day, he only felt that his bones were a little numb and it seemed that his strength had increased a little. However, he didn't care. As soon as he went out, he saw Shantu running over. "Brother, it's time to eat. Master Thick Earth said that after you eat and drink, you can continue to practice. But, brother, you are really awesome. You are the first person to reach the 9th round of the 100 War Godly Hammer." "Ha ha!" Han Fei scratched his head. When it was time to eat, he found that there was more food. He saw that each tent had a circle of sea creatures hanging on it. There were all kinds of them. Shantu said, "These days, almost most of the clansmen have gone to the sea to fish for food. When the tents are full, there will be mountains of sea creatures. So, let's eat more and eat them up." Han Fei scratched his head, looking at those colorful creatures that were much larger than him, and felt that he could eat them for a long time. After dinner, Shantu led Han Fei to the refining field where Thick Earth was. There weren't many people here. In fact, there were only a few dozen of them. However, there were many people who came to watch, all for Han Fei. After all, Han Fei's performance yesterday was too amazing. Thick Earth shouted, "There's nothing to see. Since Han Fei has a good foundation, it won't be difficult for him to reach 100 rounds. When he can hit 1,000 rounds, you guys can come and watch." Someone was stunned. 1,000 rounds? Why don't you say 10,000 rounds? A child screamed, "He's going to be crippled." Thick Earth said, "Go away, go away. Don't disturb Han Fei's cultivation." After a while, when everyone was driven away, Thick Earth said, "Han Fei, my requirement is that the quality of every weapon you make must not be lower than the twin hammers in your hands." Han Fei scratched his head. "Okay." After a while, the golden giant reappeared, and clanging sounds began to ring out. Above the capital, the Giant King was holding a roasted crab in his hand, biting it crisply, and looking at Han Fei. If it was yesterday, he still wanted to form a relationship with Han Fei. But now, he really wanted to take Han Fei as a disciple. In front of the Giant King, a small transparent jar was placed on the stone platform, inside which was golden liquid. "Will you give me the essence blood of the god of war?" 3 months later. Clang, clang, clang. Clang, clang. A pair of sledgehammers suddenly shattered. This was the 21st pair of sledgehammers that Han Fei had smashed. A rather burly boy, like a golden-armored giant, scratched his head, then naturally picked up a new pair of sledgehammers from the ground and continued to hammer. Thick Earth said with a smile, "Wang Han, your strength has increased too much recently." A large group of children were watching, and a female giant looked melancholy. "Why do humans have to grow so small? They are less than my knees. Otherwise, I can snatch them back and make them my husbands." A male giant laughed. "In your dreams. You'd better find a giant." Someone laughed and said, "If Wang Han really has a giant body, with his terrifying physique of 500 rounds a day, a large number of female giants will throw themselves at him." Humph! A group of children, what are you watching instead of cultivating? The Giant King appeared out of nowhere and drove away a group of children. Then he said lightly, "Wang Han, don't forge anymore. You have become a peak-level hidden fisher and need to further stimulate your body's potential. Come with me." Hearing this, Han Fei immediately dropped the giant hammer in his hand, and was taken to the top of a high mountain by the Giant King with a swish. The Giant King buzzed. "I know your special body tempering technique is also very strong. However, your body tempering technique is very difficult and requires a lot of energy. I'll teach you the body of war now. It's also a body refining technique, and this technique was bestowed by the war god in the past. It's definitely not weaker than your strange body refining technique. The giant king stretched out his hand and grabbed, and black boulders flew over. When these boulders were comparable to a small hill, the giant king squeezed them casually, and all the boulders turned into powder. These powders surrounded Han Fei's body. The giant king pointed between Han Fei's eyebrows, and golden light flashed. The body of war, the god of war, and the infinite combat style. It needs to be practiced together with the swallowing art. Absorb the essence of the sun and moon, and the energy of heaven and earth. Suppress your realm. Come out when you become a law enforcer. The powder quickly gathered and finally condensed into a big stone, falling on the top of the mountain. Han Fei absorbed the giant king's technique for a full hour before he slowly opened his eyes. However, he found that he was surrounded by darkness. Was he locked in a stone? However, Han Fei remembered what the giant king said. When will I become a law enforcer and when will I come out? It seems that it's not the right time yet. Then I'll cultivate. Huff from the outside, the stone wrapping Han Fei emitted a faint vibration sound. Every 10 breaths of time, this happened continuously. Han Fei didn't know that when he was swallowing, a pillar of fire descended from the sky and directly reflected on this boulder. Therefore, after only swallowing for about 10 minutes, Han Fei found that it was getting hotter and hotter, and his body began to turn slightly red. After half an hour, the boulder on the top of the mountain had turned red. In the surrounding 10 kilometers, all the spiritual plants retreated and none dared to approach. An hour later, the boulder was actually on fire, like a burning coal ball. As for Han Fei, he didn't dare to be careless at this time. His body was red, and there was power seeping into his limbs and bones. Although this stone was extremely hot, Han Fei felt that he could bear it. It seemed that in the depths of his soul, this pain was still bearable. At night, the night was as cold as water. A pale white and somewhat blue light enveloped the boulder. The whole boulder had turned into ice, and within a kilometer radius, it had completely frozen, and within 10 kilometers there was frost. Han Fei only felt extremely cold, and his body was so cold that he couldn't feel anything. The piercing coldness was drilling into his body. At this moment, Han Fei's breathing time changed from 1 breath of 10 minutes to 1 breath of 100 minutes. Every breath he took was accompanied by a crackling sound, as if ice was cracking. A month later, Han Fei felt that his strength had reached the level of a peak-level hidden fisher. 3 months later, the Beast King and the Giant King stood in the void, watching this scene quietly. The Beast King frowned and said, "You gave him the body of war? Can he bear it?" The Giant King snorted. "Of course. Compared with the extremely domineering body refining technique he has cultivated, he can completely bear the body of war. However, it's been 3 months. He shouldn't be able to suppress it anymore." The Beast King frowned and shook his head slightly. "Old Goo, aren't you teaching him too much? We're just trying to form a bond with him, and you're teaching him this? If he still can't die, won't he become a monster?" A white flower bloomed in the void, and the water fairy appeared. Shimen Linglan also appeared with it. However, Shimen Linglan's strength had reached the level of an intermediate peak-level hidden fisher. The water fairy said, "Half a year has passed. I've sent him here. I've heard about what happened here. Big guy, the body of war. Even the war giants need extremely high talent and physique to cultivate it. Are you sure it's okay to give it to him?" The Giant King grinned. "I'm sure. This kid's physique and growth rate are too fast. In terms of physique, I'm afraid few people in my tribe can compare with him." Shimen Linglan was confused. Seeing that they were all staring at a stone and talking, she seemed to think of something. Feeling the scorching power on the stone, Shimen Linglan was immediately horrified. "Senior, Wang Han is The giant king glanced at Shiman Linglon. The progress is not slow, but it'll take him half a year. With that, the giant king waved his hand and Shiman Linglon disappeared. The giant king said to the void, "Thick earth, train her for a month and then teach her the 100-war godly hammer." As if it was a trivial matter, the three of them didn't take it seriously. They were waiting to see how long Han Fei could keep it under control. Suddenly, the three of them saw the scorching sun rolling over from the sky and enveloping the huge stone. The Beast King raised his eyebrows. "Old Gu, is this also the cultivation method of the body of war?" The Water Fairy also raised her eyebrows. "It's more than twice as violent as before. Bullsh *t. This is not the cultivation method of the body of war. I know this kid is cultivating his own set of strange body refining technique again." The Beast King asked, "Is that the extremely domineering body tempering technique you mentioned?" The Giant King nodded with an ugly expression. "Yes, that's the one. That technique is extremely domineering. If you're not careful, you'll break your bones. I wonder where this kid got it from. And he has mastered it." The Water Fairy smiled and said, "This is his own opportunity. I think he already has the foundation of cultivation. At this moment, he is just recultivating. That's good. In this way, the possibility of him successfully returning to the future is higher." The Beast King waved his hand and said, "Boring. I thought he was going to break through today. It seems that we have to wait. Let's go, let's go." The Water Fairy chuckled. "I'm leaving too." After Han Fei practiced the body of war, he found that the first level of this body tempering technique had been broken through. With it alone, he could no longer suppress his realm. Originally, Han Fei wanted to make a breakthrough directly. However, his body subconsciously activated the void fishing art. At that moment, Han Fei felt inhuman pain again. He was very familiar with this feeling. He even felt this kind of pain was familiar to him. The terrifying energy was flowing back crazily. The Giant King stood alone in the void, watching Han Fei's flesh and blood in the stone constantly melting and growing. "What a reckless brat. You made me have to watch over you to prevent you from killing yourself." Another month passed. The Giant King scratched his head. Is this a sign of insufficient energy? Up until now, he still hasn't broken through the second level of that stupid technique? Gotcha! Bam! The Giant King was speechless when he saw the stone explode. It was not that Han Fei couldn't repair it, but that the boulder he casually made could no longer resist Han Fei's power. At that moment, the Giant King saw Han Fei standing proudly on the top of the mountain, naked. The almost perfect streamline and domineering muscles all over his body, if enlarged, seemed to be much better looking than the Giant King himself. However, Han Fei hadn't woken up yet. Under his feet, a large spirit-gathering formation appeared, and a large amount of spiritual energy was rolling over. The Giant King looked at it and immediately threw a large amount of spiritual spring over, which was immediately sucked up to Han Fei. After half an hour, there was a loud explosion in the sky and there was thunder rolling. A glaring King Kong appeared directly on Han Fei's body. The Giant King was dumbfounded. What is this? Why did he become a law enforcer so quickly? And what kind of technique is this? Why does it feel so powerful? Sure enough, those who can be sent across the river of time are definitely not ordinary people. What a powerful technique! Damn it, I have to do some research. However, Han Fei hadn't finished his cultivation yet. Because a large amount of spiritual energy was rapidly disappearing, Han Fei was still making a breakthrough. 2 hours later, when the spiritual energy given by the Giant King was sucked dry, the spiritual energy from all directions was still pouring in. The Giant King was speechless. More. The Giant King felt he was going crazy. Who the hell sent this freak here? Isn't he a freak? How could anyone directly stabilize their cultivation after breaking through to become a law enforcer and continue to improve? 3 hours later, When everything calmed down, the giant king slowly let out a sigh of relief. It's over, it's finally over. If it doesn't end now, I'm going to doubt my life. At that moment, when Han Fei opened his eyes, a large number of memory fragments in his mind were piecing together, and his disordered soul began to return. It was a pity that at the moment when Han Fei opened his eyes, although he had recovered a lot, he hadn't fully recovered. However, there was light in his eyes. Han Fei looked at the void. Who am I? Why, do you remember who you are? When Han Fei saw the giant king, he was slightly stunned and then responded with a smile. Nice to meet you, senior. It seems that he has become much smarter. It seems that the effect of this breakthrough can indeed bring about the recovery of the soul. It seems that if you make a few more breakthroughs, you may be able to completely recover your memories. Han Fei smiled, and many pictures appeared in his mind. Xia Shaochan, Zhang Xuanyu, Lu Renquang, Luo Xiaobai, Tang Guo, Old Bai, and the others were clearly visible. He felt that these people seemed very familiar. Some pictures about the Heavenly Water Village, the team experience, and the Thug Academy also appeared in his mind. Thug Academy? Han Fei smiled easily. Senior, I'll remember your kindness. Bam! Han Fei was slapped away. Damn, I've taught you for so long, and now I'm your senior? Didn't I say I was your master? Han Fei shook his head, stood in the void again, and smiled awkwardly. Thank you, teacher. The giant king reluctantly accepted it and grunted. It seems that you are indeed a little better. You've become more articulate. Do you remember where you came from? Han Fei thought for a long time and slowly said, The Thug Academy. The giant king thought for a moment. I've never heard of it. Forget it, you just got rid of your stupidity and recovered your spiritual sense. It's still too early to recover your memories. Let's go. Now that your spiritual sense has returned, do you still remember the little girl in your clan? Han Fei nodded with a smile. Yes. Shimen Linglan, this woman was the person in his memory the clearest. From the first time they met, to the jungle of the remote wilderness, and then to the 100,000 mountains, everything was vivid in his mind. How could he forget? However, when Han Fei thought of this name, he was a little taken aback. It seemed that he still missed something? However, he didn't care anymore. He used to be silly. This girl was always on tenterhooks. Although there were still many things that he couldn't remember, he would remember them eventually. Probably guessing what Han Fei was thinking, the giant king suddenly said, Silly boy, do you like that girl? Han Fei smiled slightly. I think so. The giant king paused for a moment and said, Then I'll give you a suggestion. If you like her, don't make a breakthrough until you can't bear it anymore. First update. Asking for votes, end of this chapter. Chapter 11:26. Han Fei was puzzled by the giant king's words. He seemed to suddenly wake up. Shouldn't he work harder to break through himself? Get back his memory earlier. Suddenly, Han Fei's face changed slightly. Master, are you saying that my memory will change the relationship between me and Ling Lan? The giant king hummed. Of course. Since your spiritual sense has been awakened, you should recognize your extraordinariness. You may not be a person of this era. No, you are definitely not a person of this era. You crossed the long river of time and came back here. When all of your memories are awakened, you will know why you came here, and you will know where you should go. At that time, do you think you can still take that little girl away? Han Fei didn't quite understand. Although his spiritual sense had been awakened, he had forgotten too much after all. What long river of time? He didn't understand at all. In short, what the giant king meant was that he would leave this world one day. But wasn't there only one world? Could it be that he could return to the past and the future? Han Fei's heart sank. Understood, master. The giant king sighed. Boy, you are in a dilemma now. In this world, there may only be one little girl waiting for you. But in another era, there may be thousands of people, or even the entire human race waiting for you. So, you actually have no choice. You will leave in the end. The Giant King continued, Actually, I think you should continue to seal your spiritual sense. In this way, your cultivation will be more pure. Otherwise, your spiritual sense will only be troubled by all kinds of memories in your mind. Han Fei's face became a little pale. After a long time, he suddenly looked up and said, Master, is there a way to seal my spiritual sense? The Giant King took a breath. Even if I have a way, your spiritual sense has been awakened. Whenever you break through or your soul is repaired, your spiritual sense will also be awakened. This process is irreversible. Unless every time you restore your spiritual sense, someone will help you seal it. But obviously, this is unlikely. Because once you are fully awake, you will resist the pillar and the seal. Even if you want to seal it, you might not be able to. Han Fei gritted his teeth. Master, please seal my spiritual sense first. Shimin Linglan was diligently practicing the 100 Wars divine hammer. Unfortunately, even if she gave it her all, she could only swing it once. After one round, she was already exhausted. Shimin Linglan heard that Han Fei swung the hammer 9 times for the first time, breaking the record of the war giant. Ho Tu even secretly told Shimin Linglan that even the king giant only swung it 5 times. This time, Shimin Linglan was under a lot of pressure. Didn't that mean that Han Fei's potential was greater than that of the Giant King? After one round, Shimin Linglan took 7 to 8 consecutive deep breaths. Her gaze was firm as she swung the hammer again. Thick Earth said, Little girl, the chances of success are very low if you want to swing a second time. That means that your physique is already comparable to a powerful adult giant. Shimin Linglan shouted, I can. Clang clang clang. After swinging the hammer more than 50 times, Shimin Linglan finally couldn't take it anymore. Her arm broke. With a swoosh, a figure appeared, and the divine healing technique suddenly descended. Han Fei grabbed Shimin Linglan's arm and pressed it gently. With a click, the arm was reattached. Before Shimin Linglan saw Han Fei, she said in surprise, Idiot, you're back. Puff. What kind of image is that? They hadn't seen each other for more than half a year. Shimin Linglan missed him every day. So, she reached out and hugged Han Fei. Next time, don't force yourself. Han Fei scratched his head and cast the divine healing technique on Shimin Linglan again. It seemed that he didn't feel the soft and fragrant body in his arms at all. Shimin Linglan didn't notice it at all. She looked up and smiled. Idiot, do you think my strength is growing fast? Han Fei chuckled. Fast. Ahem. The king giant appeared and said casually, I swung it once. It can barely keep up with the physique of an ordinary giant. It seems that you have also learned the essence of Wang Han's grand acupoint combination technique. What level have you reached in your cultivation? Shimin Linglan quickly let go of Han Fei and said respectfully, Senior, I have reached the 16th acupoint. The king giant nodded slightly. Well, no wonder you can continue to swing for more than 50 times. When you reach the 8th acupoint, you should be able to swing it twice. When the major acupoints are combined, you should be able to swing it 3 times. As for more than 3 times, you may have a chance when you become a peak-level hidden fisher, but it will be very difficult. Hearing this, Shimin Linglan's eyes immediately lit up. Thank you for your guidance, Senior. The king giant nodded. Okay. Wang Han, there are still a few months before you go to the Beast King. You can help me refine weapons. During this period, you don't need to cultivate. Okay. The king giant shook his head slightly. Okay? Why are you still standing there? You haven't eaten for more than half a year. Aren't you hungry? Hurry up and eat. This girl's cultivation has just begun. Don't disturb her. Although Shimin Linglan really wanted to see Han Fei, she still pushed him away and said, You go eat. I still need to cultivate. 5 months later. At night, the moon was bright and the stars were sparse. Han Fei and Shimin Linglan had gotten used to this kind of snoring. They could already go to sleep against the thunderous snoring. However, Shimin Linglon was not asleep at this moment. She had just finished eating and was cultivating the 108 desolate god body. After one round she took a breath and said, "Idiot, it's so difficult to combine the major acupoints." Han Fei sat on the futon and watched Shimin Linglon cultivate. Hearing Shimin Linglon's complaint, Han Fei scratched his head. "It's fast." Shimin Linglon sighed. "Idiot, why didn't Senior Giant King teach you cultivation in the past few months?" Han Fei shook his head. "I don't know. Maybe I'm too stupid." "Bah, if you are stupid, what am I?" Shimin Linglon practiced again. It was not until late at night that she was so tired that she lay on the futon and didn't want to move at all. "Alas, idiot, let me tell you, in 3 months at most, I will definitely make some progress. By then, I will be able to swing the 100 Wars Divine Hammer at least twice. Then, I will go to Senior Beast King's place to find you." Han Fei smiled innocently. "Okay." The next morning, the Giant King took Han Fei to the place where the Beast King was. It was called the Beast King Valley. When he saw Han Fei again, the Beast King looked at Han Fei with a big stick and couldn't help but say, "Why is this kid still so naive?" The Giant King didn't hold back and told him that Han Fei had sealed his spiritual sense. The Beast King empathized with him. "It's just like when my wife died of old age. I was heartbroken. This kid is really sentimental. However, it's fine. This king only has the Beast King technique. The rest are offensive skills. At that time, if his spiritual sense is opened again, this king will seal it for him again." The Giant King said, "Although his spiritual sense is sealed, this kid has a strong heart. You have to suppress him to make a breakthrough. Otherwise, he is likely to cultivate and make a breakthrough on his own." The ape waved his hand and said, "I understand. You can go now. I'm going to teach a disciple." The Giant King sneered. "I've taught him everything. This kid is already inhumanly strong. What else can you teach him? The Beast King technique is just icing on the cake." After the Giant King left, the ape curled his lips and said, "Old Goo, you've learned to be smart. Do you think I have nothing to teach you? I don't care if I make a breakthrough or not. If I make a breakthrough, I'll just seal it again." Figuring it out, the ape casually threw a rod that he had prepared to Han Fei. "My disciple, this rod will be your weapon in the future. I made it for you personally. Don't throw it away." Han Fei scratched his head and smiled. "Okay." The ape patted his butt and said, "Let's go. I'll take you to meet the old beasts. They are all top masters. Well, let's meet the beasts first." The Beast King's idea was very simple. But if the beasts were in a bad situation in the future, even if he wanted Han Fei to take care of them, he should at least let Han Fei know them first, right? After all, many beasts were actually not very friendly. Otherwise, the remote wilderness jungle wouldn't have become a hunting ground for humans in the past. And the beasts wouldn't take the initiative to attack humans. Huh! All the beasts above the level of law enforcer, come here! The Beast King roared, and all kinds of roars rose and fell in the forest. Swish! 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 The first to arrive were naturally the explorers. Han Fei scratched his head. Have I seen them before? Among these explorers, there were colorful tigers, giant apes like the Beast King, one-horned rhinoceroses, violent giant bears, lightning leopards, six-tailed white foxes, handsome white sheep with strange horns, elephants in black armor, and ordinary-looking water buffaloes. Han Fei was stunned too. In the 100,000 mountains there were more than 50 explorers. That was a terrifying number. And this was just one beast, not including the Sky Clan, the Spiritual Plant Clan, the Giant Territory. As for the creatures above the level of Law Enforcer, there were even more. Almost all of a sudden, the Beast King Valley was full. Among these creatures, some looked familiar to Han Fei. However, most of them were in strange shapes, the kind that he was completely unfamiliar with. The first to speak was neither the colorful tiger nor the violent giant bear, but the odd-horned white sheep that was emitting a faint fluorescence. At this moment, the proud white sheep looked at Han Fei up and down. Is this human the oracle that the war giants mentioned? The violent giant bear grinned and roared. I can feel that this kid's blood is vigorous. He doesn't look like an ordinary person. The colorful tiger glared at him. Why is this kid looking at me? It can't be helped. Among this group of people, this tiger's fur is always the most eye-catching. He must have been shocked. All the beasts, all the explorer-level beasts could speak. Even the creatures in the law enforcer level could speak. However, they generally had no right to speak on such occasions. For example, when the colorful tiger was narcissistic, most of the law enforcers were indifferent. Only the experts in the same realm, such as the odd-horned white sheep, showed strong disdain in their eyes. The six-tailed white fox even rolled its eyes and sneered. Of course, the colorful tiger might be used to it. So, it didn't matter at all. His pupils constricted, and his pupils narrowed as he stared at Han Fei. This was a sign of hunting. However, Han Fei was still a fool at the moment, and he was on the invincible realm, so he didn't react at all. Ha ha ha, a big ape laughed. Alas! This tiger is so embarrassing. Oh! The colorful tiger turned around and glared at him. Damn monkey, shut up. The Beast King hammered the stick in his hand and said, Okay, shut up. Today, it's mainly about recognizing our relationship. At this moment, the human Wang Han has been accepted as a disciple by me. In addition to my great techniques, you can also be his half-teacher. The 100 Beasts' soul-suppressing roar will also be taught to him. For a moment, the beasts were in an uproar. The violent giant bear said, Why? How can this human boy be qualified to inherit the 100 Beasts' soul-suppressing roar? The six-tailed white fox asked, King, what's his background? The water buffalo said in a heavy voice, This boy doesn't represent the human race, does he? The white sheep said lightly, He can, but we have to know why. The Beast King roared, This has nothing to do with the human race. This boy crossed the river of time and came to the 100,000 mountains. In the future, I'm afraid there will be great changes in the beast race. Do you understand? Old Gu even taught him the body of war. What's wrong with you teaching him the 100 Beasts' soul-suppressing roar? Hum hum, the beast seethed again. The main reason was that the name River of Time was too shocking. The beasts looked at Han Fei incredulously, thinking, This guy can cross the River of Time? Some law enforcers didn't even know what the River of Time was. Even the explorer-level creatures only knew a little about it. It was a secret that they could never touch. The Beast King said to the beasts, After I teach you the technique, let Wang Han go to your territory to learn. All of you, teach him well. This will benefit the descendants of Fleur and the others in the future. Don't neglect him. The old water buffalo nodded. Okay. Since someone agreed and it involved a big secret, naturally no one objected. After the Beast King introduced the beasts one by one, the Beast King didn't summon hidden fishers, mainly because those creatures came too late. Besides, the law of survival for beasts was the law of the jungle. The strong didn't treat the weak like they were of the same species. If they were in a good mood, they wouldn't eat them. If they were in a bad mood, they would kill them. After dispersing the beasts, the Beast King looked at Han Fei, who was still a little dazed, and said, Disciple, I'll teach you the technique later. The Beast King was even more direct than the Giant King. He pointed his finger at the center of Han Fei's eyebrows. Before he started teaching the technique, he injected the 10,000 beasts illustration into Han Fei's soul. Anyway, as long as he didn't spy on Han Fei's soul, the demon purification pot wouldn't take effect. Han Fei felt as if thousands of beasts were galloping in his mind. All kinds of beasts emerged one by one and then quickly melted away. The reason why he injected the 10,000 beasts illustration was that the Beast King wanted Han Fei to recognize every kind of beast. As for whether Han Fei would be good to the beasts in the future, although it was hard to say, The Beast King felt that he could implant the concept of beast friendliness into Han Fei's soul first. So those fierce beasts in Han Fei's mind became charmingly naive. An image of beast friendliness was imprinted in Han Fei's mind. In fact, even without this step, the Beast King wasn't very worried. Because if he was right, the situation in the future was no better than in the Age of Doom. If the sea race dominated at that time, even if the human race wanted to rise, they wouldn't attack the beasts. All the races would unite to fight against the enemy, which was the general trend. At that time, whether Han Fei was really friendly to the beasts or not, as long as he was not on the sea race's side, he would have to unite with the beast. At this time, a strange technique entered his mind. Han Fei's body tightened, and the beast transformation technique appeared in his mind. The Beast King roared, "Don't resist. This is the Beast King art, a secret technique of the Beast King Valley. You can transform into a beast body, which is beneficial to you." Han Fei calmed down slightly and didn't wake up until an hour later. Seeing Han Fei's stunned expression, the Beast King exclaimed, wondering why Han Fei, who was so naive, would show such an expression. However, this expression soon disappeared. In fact, Han Fei just thought of the fish transformation technique. However, this Beast King art was actually similar to the fish transformation technique. But in fact, these two techniques were fundamentally different. To be precise, this Beast King art was equivalent to a transformation technique. However, there was a limit to this transformation technique. Han Fei couldn't directly become a kind of creature. If he wanted to transform into a beast, he couldn't simply change into their appearance. He had to understand their fighting style. In addition to the transformation technique, one of the stronger abilities of the Beast King art was to stimulate his remaining combat power in advance. It could make his body bigger and stronger. This was also the reason why those powerhouses could easily transform into giants that were hundreds of meters tall. It was equivalent to a machine with only 20% of its normal power. But with this technique, it could directly become 100%. The consequences could be imagined. It was equivalent to the explosion of a small universe. When Han Fei remembered all this, the Beast King nodded slightly with satisfaction, exhaled white gas from his mouth, and said in a deep voice, "Disciple, I've taught you a lot. Remember to live in harmony with the beasts in the future." Han Fei scratched his head. "Okay." The Beast King laughed. "Go. In the next year, when you walk out of my Beast King Valley, you can go to the territory of those old beasts and learn the Beast King art and the 100 Beast Soul Suppression Roar." The Beast King waved his hand and Han Fei disappeared. When Han Fei reappeared, he found that many apes and monkeys were looking at him. Some monkeys were sitting on trees eating bananas. Some were hanging upside down on trees, and some were looking at him curiously. And most of the apes were holding giant sticks, their chests heaving as if they were going to fight with Han Fei. However, Han Fei suddenly frowned. Why is this place so familiar? He looked back and saw a huge stone seat not far behind him. Subconsciously, Han Fei looked at the top of the mountain, not far away, and found that there was a cliff there. On the cliff, a set of very familiar stick techniques were engraved. "Monkey King 3000 strikes?" Han Fei murmured to himself. He didn't know why he said this word. Anyway, he just said it subconsciously. "Ho!" A big ape roared and pointed to a hidden fisher-level ape. "He's here. You go and have a try. Let the human have a taste of our 3000 devil stick." With that, the big ape looked at Han Fei. "Human boy, although you are my king's disciple. However, it's not easy to walk out of the Beast King Valley. It's even more difficult to walk out of the territory of those old beasts. You have to fight. Ho! Fight, fight, fight on the trees in all directions, the little monkeys and big apes shouted one after another. They all ate bananas and watched the show, seeming very excited. The ape that was pointed at was already a law enforcer. He glanced at Han Fei and said not very fluently, "Human, let me try. Can you do it?" "Oh." The ape leaped into the air with the stick in its hand. The big stick was bent and smashed straight at Han Fei. Han Fei held the stick given by the Beast King in his hand and subconsciously fought back. Clang, clang, clang. There were many ways to fight with sticks. The ape didn't use a big move at the beginning, but habitually used various techniques, such as hitting, lifting, chopping, covering, pressing, sweeping, piercing, picking, lifting, pushing. Han Fei's footwork changed and his body twisted unconventionally. He switched the stick techniques in his hand at will, as if he was very proficient in stick technique. A big ape was surprised. This human is not bad. Has he learned stick techniques before? He looks very proficient. An old ape said, he must have learned them. Look at his stick technique. From exerting force to twisting his body, this boy's stick technique itself must be quite good. The Beast King was also watching this side at this moment. However, these techniques were not worth mentioning in his eyes at all. In the eyes of the strong, what were techniques? But they were all fancy things. As long as you were strong enough, you could deal with them with pure physique and reaction speed. When the monkey executed the Monkey King 3000 staff strike, the waves instantly stacked up like tidal waves, layer after layer. In just a few seconds, Han Fei was blasted back. Just when the Beast King and the group of apes were triumphant, suddenly, they saw Han Fei's stick flying across the sky, and in an instant hundreds of sticks were stacked. How could this be? Why does he know the 3000 sticks? The Beast King's eyes widened suddenly and then slowly narrowed. With his eyesight as a peak-level venerable, he could see at a glance that Han Fei was quite familiar with the 3000 sticks. Although he didn't seem to be very proficient in it, it was definitely not the first time he had touched it. This kid really has a chance with my clan. It seems that he has already touched the 3000 sticks in the future. No wonder, I feel that he has something to do with the beasts. The Beast King grinned. That's good. It would be even better if Han Fei had something to do with the beasts. However, the Beast King also frowned slightly. Han Fei might have learned the 3000 sticks because of a chance. However, his own clan generally wouldn't teach it to outsiders. What kind of chance was it? Would he teach the 3000 sticks to others? Second update. Please vote. End of this chapter.